Chapter 951, Genius of a Generation, Favourite Gu. Chapter 951, Genius of a Generation, Favourite Gu. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Fang Yuan returned to Hu immortal blessed land. Blazing Heaven Demoness compensation was very satisfactory. Firstly, Blazing Heaven Demoness recently funded immortal materials were all waived, Fang Yuan did not need to pay her back. Secondly, Blazing Heaven Demoness lent Fang Yuan 3 Fire Path Immortal Gu and gave him a large number of Mortal Gu. These 3 Fire Path Immortal Gu along with the countless Mortal Gu could create the Fire Path Immortal Killer move, Nirvana Fire. Speaking of which, Blazing Heaven Demoness was quite unlucky. She had funded Fang Yuan in refining Star Thought Immortal Gu, and provided him a huge amount of precious immortal materials. In the end, all of it went to waste and Fang Yuan did not need to pay her back. Even though Blazing Heaven Demoness had tampered with the immortal materials earlier, Fang Yuan had gained a lot of experience from it. He was very familiar with the refinement process of Star Thought Immortal Gu. Because of the alliance agreement, Fang Yuan obtained the details of the immortal killer move Nirvana Fire. Which immortal Gu were the cores, how many supplementary mortal Gu were needed, what was the order of the Gu worms, Fang Yuan knew all of these clearly. But to use this killer move, there was a prerequisite: Fire Path Dao marks needed to be expended from the Gu immortal's body. Blazing Heaven Demoness had cleverly concealed this fact. It was a small trap in the agreement. She wanted to increase her control over Fang Yuan using this. Since Fang Yuan did not have any Fire Path Dao marks, if he wanted to revive using Nirvana Fire, he would need Blazing Heaven Demoness to use Nirvana Fire for him. Fang Yuan planned to modify the immortal killer move Nirvana Fire, using other immortal Gu as the cores to achieve the same or similar results. And it would be best if these new core immortal Gu were immortal Gu that Fang Yuan possessed. This modification was very difficult. Typical Wisdom Path Gu immortals would not have any confidence in this, but Fang Yuan had high hopes for it. The reason was because Wisdom Gu was inside Hu immortal blessed land. The power of the rank 9 Wisdom Gu was simply brilliant, it could not be expressed with words. It was important for Fang Yuan to do this. The Life and Death Immortal Aperture Revival method could allow him to revive, but it could only be used once on each immortal aperture. After revival, he would not be able to use Wisdom Gu. If Fang Yuan could modify Nirvana Fire and freely change between being an immortal zombie and a living person, Wisdom Gu would continue to assist him in unimaginable ways. Blazing Heaven Demoness is tight on funds now. She needs to spend her own resources to refine Immortal Gu and complete the mandatory mission by Zombie Alliance. Thus, she had to lend out these 3 Fire Path Immortal Gu. If not for this situation, even if I requested it, she would not lend them to me so easily. With these 3 Fire Path Immortal Gu, my modification and deduction will be much easier. Fang Yuan felt very pleased about this. The Gu formation plan of Zombie Alliance unexpectedly made him a beneficiary. In the following days, Fang Yuan was bathed in the light of wisdom. He deduced with all his energy, concentrating on modifying the killer move Nirvana Fire. Speaking of which, he had already gathered enough Strength Path Immortal Zombies and refined enough Exert Strength Gu. He even had a 60-year lifespan Gu. He had all 3. He could activate the Life and Death Immortal Aperture Revival method now to become a living Gu immortal and obtain a high-grade blessed land. But after obtaining Nirvana Fire, Fang Yuan was no longer satisfied with just this. Even though with Blazing Heaven Demoness interference, Fang Yuan was prevented from plotting against He Lu Lan and obtaining a super-grade blessed land. Because of this opportunity, he obtained Nirvana Fire, and if he used it well, he would be able to continue using Wisdom Gu. Summing up his gains and losses, Fang Yuan was uncertain if he had overall made a gain or a loss. Just as Fang Yuan was modifying the immortal killer move, Zhao Lianyun had already stepped into Luopa Valley. She was the key to rescuing Favourite Gu. There was only one person who came along with her as the rescue team from Spirit Affinity House. Prince Feng Xian. His rank 8 cultivation could face any challenges. On the surface, he was a Northern Plains righteous path Gu immortal, and was an external supreme elder of a super force, Gong tribe. He did not have the Huang Jin bloodline in him, and because he had some grievances with Gong tribe, he had been living outside for many years. The truth was, he was a disciple of Spirit Affinity House. The Central Continent Force had spent a huge effort and price to send him into Northern Plains as their highest level spy, his main task being in regards to 88 True Yang building. Normally, Prince Feng Xian could not be used easily. If any traces were exposed, Prince Feng Xian's secret status, which had been hidden for hundreds of years, would be wasted. But it was different now because of Feng Gu. He was the face of Spirit Affinity House. Currently, he already could suppress the rest of Central Continent. If he advanced to rank 8, with his talent and ability, in time, he would be an expert even among rank 8s. His existence meant more benefits. His life and death would tilt the balance between the 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent, and even change the situation of the entire Central Continent Gu immortal world. Thus, Spirit Affinity House took a risk in using the hidden agent Prince Feng Xian, to try and save him as soon as possible. Prince Feng Xian and Zhao Lianyun, a mortal and an immortal, moved forward in Luopa Valley. Lord, I would like to ask a question. If I can save Lord Feng Gu, will I be able to become the next generation fairy of Spirit Affinity House? While traveling, Zhao Lianyun asked this. Prince Feng Xian wore a mask, his figure was blurry, he was shrouded in fog, his true appearance was concealed. He said softly with a smile, "It is not so easy to become Spirit Affinity House's next generation fairy. But if you can save Feng Gu, then it would almost be guaranteed that you succeed. I heard that his daughter Feng Jin Huang is the top competitor for this title. If you become the savior of her father's life, she would step down from this contest for sure." So that's it. Zhao Lianyun's eyes shined with the light of hope. Even though she had the soul of an adult, after she went to Spirit Affinity House, she was very cooperative, she did not conceal anything and acted obediently. Because she had understood what world she was in. Without strength, no matter how intelligent you were like a loose strand of grass, once the wind blew, you would be blown away and sent into danger. She understood that she needed to rely on Spirit Affinity House to save Ma Hongyun. But it was unrealistic to get Spirit Affinity House to attack Snowy Mountain. Zhao Lianyun had understood the rules of Spirit Affinity House, all the generations of fairies were fully nurtured by the sect. In Spirit Affinity House's long history, all of these fairies had become Gu immortals, they had immense strength and had significant authority in the sect. To save Brother Hongyun, I need to rely on myself. Brother Hongyun, you must hang in there. Zhao Lianyun prayed for Ma Hongyun internally. Prince Feng Xian suddenly stopped moving, found it, it is here. Using the immortal Gu from Spirit Affinity House, Prince Feng Xian obtained an immortal killer move that was specialized in finding the thieving heaven inheritance. To use this killer move, they had to move slowly. Prince Feng Xian brought Zhao Lianyun and walked for over 2 hours before they located the thieving heaven inheritance in the giant Luopa Valley. Prince Feng Xian activated his immortal Gu, and in a few minutes, an entrance of light opened. Whoosh! The entrance of light had just opened when an intense wind blew. Prince Feng Xian was shocked, how can the winds of assimilation be here? He quickly activated his immortal Gu, using a killer move and grabbing with his hand. The winds of assimilation were condensed into a ball, grabbed tightly by Prince Feng Xian in his hand. But soon, Prince Feng Xian's hand started trembling as his expression turned pale. Quickly go in, I can only control it for a moment. Zhao Lianyun swiftly acknowledged his words, even though she could not see his face, she could hear how anxious he was from his voice. Zhao Lianyun stepped in and saw a familiar sight. Like the previous inheritance space, this place was empty. The only thing here were over a dozen tornadoes of the winds of assimilation, moving slowly in the space like tall pillars. Zhao Lianyun's heart was pounding. Even though she did not know what the winds of assimilation were, from the actions of Prince Feng Xian, she knew that they were incredibly powerful. You are finally here, quickly come to me. A voice was transmitted into her ears. Zhao Lianyun was shocked, she took a step back, who are you? I am Feng Gu, hurry, come here now. The voice was extremely weak, it sounded like a dying old man who was holding on to his last breath. Zhao Lianyun hesitated. She could hear that the voice came from within one of the tornadoes of the winds of assimilation. Zhao Lianyun also realized that the tornadoes were all gathering towards the most central one, they were moving slowly, like a group of lions stalking and eyeing up on their food. Don't worry, you are an otherworldly demon, you have received the acceptance of thieving heaven's will, the winds of assimilation are harmless to you. Feng Gu paused before speaking with difficulty, didn't you come to save me? If I stay here, you will not be able to inherit this thieving heaven inheritance. Zhao Lianyun licked her dry lips. She knew that she had to make a decision now. Time waits for no one. Zhao Lianyun carefully got closer to a tornado of the winds of assimilation, the tornado's power was very concentrated, Zhao Lianyun could only feel a light breeze when she was beside it. She stretched out her trembling hand as she placed it into the tornado. If any Gu immortal saw this, they would cry out in shock. But Zhao Lianyun's ignorance made her less fearful, she did not know the power of the winds of assimilation, and she chose to believe in Feng Gu. Like what Feng Gu had said, the winds of assimilation that even Prince Feng Xian could not deal with were harmless towards Zhao Lianyun. After Zhao Lianyun placed her hand into it, the tornado shrunk at an observable rate, in a few breaths' time, it vanished. Feng Jiuji's voice was transmitted again, see, wasn't I correct? This inheritance space has a power greater than the winds of assimilation, thus it cannot be destroyed. You are an otherworldly demon accepted by this space, with it protecting you, you are in no danger. Zhao Lianyun was overjoyed, Lord Feng Gu, I will save you now. She rushed into the tornadoes, charging her way in, as the winds of assimilation vanished wherever she went. Eventually, she reached the center, and the largest wind pillar trapping Feng Gu dispersed. Next, she saw that Feng Gu was sitting cross-legged in the air, 3 meters from the ground. His face was rosy and his robe was clean, but his eyes were shut tight. Lord Feng Gu. Zhao Lianyun called out lightly. Feng Gu slowly opened his eyes, his expression was clear as jade. He did not speak, he opened his right hand and showed it to Zhao Lianyun. There were 2 words written with blood on his palm. Zhao Lianyun looked at it in confusion, turning her gaze towards Feng Gu again. Feng Gu smiled lightly at her, next, his entire body scattered with the wind, it disintegrated and vanished on the spot. Zhao Lianyun was left staring blankly. The greatest genius of a generation, Feng Gu, had passed away. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 952, Fang Yuan's first entry into Luopa Valley. Chapter 952, Fang Yuan's first entry into Luopa Valley. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Who immortal blessed land. Because the rate of time was different, half a month had already passed here. In the underground cave, Fang Yuan was bathed in the light of wisdom as he deduced quietly as usual. In here, he did not need to use the killer move vaguely familiar face, he was in his original zombie appearance. He did not move, he sat still like a rock. But in his mind, countless starlight specks were shining, as thoughts clashed endlessly within. Puff. A long while later, he let out a breath, he opened his eyes and showed an extremely tired expression. He stood up with difficulty, after undergoing such a long period of intense thinking, his mind was hurting and he felt waves of dizziness. Even though he was a Wisdom Path Grandmaster, his Fire Path attainment level was too low, he could only maintain each deduction for 7 days and nights. After 7 days and nights, he would need to rest, unable to continue further. His mind was like a simmering cauldron, it needed time to cool down frequently. If not, his mind would suffer considerable damage. After so many days, I have only completed 20% of Nirvana Fire's modification. And this was with the effect of the light of wisdom. If I did it alone, I would need countless years to reach my current progress. Immortal Killer Move were very hard to create. The Killer Move Nirvana Fire was even more profound. Using fire path to display the mysteries of life and death, if blazing heaven demoness was not a fire path great grandmaster, she might not have successfully created this move. Fang Yuan left the underground cave and returned to Dang Hun Palace to rest. After sleeping for half a day, his mind was refreshed, but according to his experience, Fang Yuan still needed to rest for an entire night before he could recover fully. Hu immortal blessed land did not have day and night, there were no changes in the sky. But if it did, then there would still be 6 hours until night time. Fang Yuan was unwilling to waste his time. He activated connecting heaven Gu and his consciousness entered treasure yellow heaven. During this period of time, he selectively put some rank 8 immortal materials up for sale, to exchange for a large amount of food to feed his immortal Gu. Of course, the more precious quasi-rank 9 immortal materials were kept in his possession. The rank 8 immortal materials that he sold were the lowest quality among his inventory. Even so, waves of commotion were created in treasure yellow heaven as a result. The attraction of rank 8 immortal materials was huge. This allowed Fang Yuan to easily complete the current goal of feeding his immortal Gu. If not for these rank 8 immortal materials, I would be troubled by this for a long time. Fang Yuan was feeling the burden of feeding immortal Gu now. He had simply too many immortal Gu on him right now. Very few Gu immortals had so many immortal Gu in their possession. The burden of feeding these immortal Gu was huge. Actually, quality was more important than quantity for immortal Gu. Like Shui Song Zi, he only had 1 immortal Gu, but after Shadow Sect gave him a set of immortal killer moves, he fought without any clear weaknesses. In this situation, he was making full use of his immortal Gu. The most common situation is to feed a small number of immortal Gu and use them as the cores to create many different immortal killer move to deal with different situations. Fang Yuan knew this, but he had no choice. He could not sell these immortal Gu easily. Transactions of immortal Gu were very rare, even if there occurred, they traded immortal Gu for immortal Gu. After settling the final deal in treasure yellow heaven, Fang Yuan's immortal Gu feeding session ended for the time being. As for the refinement of Star Thought immortal Gu, Fang Yuan had set it aside. He still had the rank 6 immortal Gu recipe of all-out effort Gu, but he did not plan to refine it. Even though he lost self-strength immortal Gu and his battle strength fell drastically. The success rate of refining immortal Gu was too low. In order to refine Star Thought immortal Gu, Fang Yuan suffered huge losses. Right now, he felt sick every time he heard about refining immortal Gu. He felt some pity and sympathy towards the immortal zombies who were refining immortal Gu collectively right now. He did not lack immortal essence stones currently, but his funds were all spent on the building of Star Form Blessed Land. During this period, Fang Yuan had been multitasking. Star Form Land Spirit had been working laboriously, following the design plans of Fang Yuan in building the new structures. Right now, Star Form Blessed Land was already 40% done with the new development. But with the revival method, Fang Yuan no longer felt such urgency towards Star Form Blessed Land. Fang Yuan also did not plan to move Hu Immortal Blessed Land's resources into Star Form Blessed Land. During this period, Fang Yuan's time in Hu Immortal Blessed Land was fulfilling and peaceful. His main effort was on modifying the killer move Nirvana Fire. Everything was prepared now, he only lacked the final critical elements. Once Nirvana Fire was completed, Fang Yuan would revive and obtain a high-grade Blessed Land. Next, he will move all of the Blessed Land's resources into his own immortal aperture. This was the safest and fastest way. Undoubtedly, once this plan succeeds, Fang Yuan's future would be bright. Fang Yuan waited patiently. He was not anxious, even though he had been seeking this goal for a long time. His experiences in the 500 years of his previous life trained his incredible level of patience. But just when he was preparing to rest for the night before continuing his killer move modification, He Lu Lan requested help from him. You will never imagine what I found in He Cheng's soul. Using a stargate, He Lu Lan arrived in front of Fang Yuan excitedly. After He Cheng died, his soul was captured by He Lu Lan. These last days, He Lu Lan had obtained lots of shocking information from He Cheng's soul. What moved her the most was the 100 Days battle in Luopa Valley. Fong Yuan, you have the ability to move mountains, I need you to retrieve Luo Pa Valley for me. Don't worry, I will give you enough compensation. We have to move quickly before complications arise. He Lu Lan acted rapidly. Luo Pa Valley. Fong Yuan did not speak, he thought of the open-door Gu and closed-door Gu in his possession. He had the clue to Luo Pa Valley long ago, but he was bothered with other matters and did not head there. Now, after receiving He Lu Lan's information, he was internally glad about his vigilance and careful decision. Luo Pa Valley was under the control of Shadow Sect long ago, it was their base. If Fong Yuan headed there abruptly, without enough strength, he would be easily captured by the other party. Even if he struggled while risking his life, his enemies would be too powerful, there would be little hope of escaping. But now is a chance. He Lu Lan's eyes shined brightly. Fong Yuan nodded, agreeing, Shadow Sect failed and Luo Pa Valley is controlled by the Central Continent Gu Immortals now. But they are from another region after all, they cannot stay for long. We just need to leak some information to force them to escape. He Lu Lan and Fong Yuan did not know that the Central Continent Gu Immortals had already left Northern Plains, returning to Central Continent. Fong Yuan had always been weak in collecting information. In terms of Northern Plains, he relied on Fairy Li Shan. In terms of Central Continent, Immortal Crane's sect would never reveal such secrets to him. This group of people should be trying to investigate the culprit behind the fall of 88 True Yang Building, they are after us. But for some reason, their investigation led to Shadow Sect. He Lu Lan chuckled. Fong Yuan pondered, compared to this, I am more concerned about the Blazing Glory Lightning Brilliance Immortal Zombie. He is a member of Shadow Sect, why was he saved by Zombie Alliance? When the mysterious Gu Immortal revealed his identity as a 10 Extreme Immortal Zombie, He Cheng was there as well, thus this precious information was leaked. Sigh, there are many secretive Gu Immortals and Gu Master Forces. Zombie Alliance has a loose structure, many of the members have their own forces, this is nothing strange, right? He Lu Lan said nonchalantly. Shadow Sect is not to be underestimated. Fong Yuan had a heavy expression, Shadow Sect members are not afraid of sacrifice, the unity of this mysterious force is simply too high. This was not the first time Fong Yuan had heard of Shadow Sect. Back in southern border, he had heard about it from Chojiu. Fong Yuan even knew that the door of life and death was inside Shadow Sect's blessed land. But he did not make any plans regarding it. The reason was that his strength was too low, and there was no good opportunity. It was very difficult to attack a blessed land and not attract attention. Shadow Sect was mysterious and stretched across southern border and northern plains, they were not to be trifled with. Alright, enough of that. Luo Pa Valley is right in front of us, I am inviting you and my aunts to explore it. We will split the gains according to our alliance agreement. He Lu Lan said anxiously. Fong Yuan understood why she was in a rush. This was truly an incredibly rare opportunity. Fong Yuan was excited too. He still had open-door Gu and closed-door Gu in his possession, he wanted to know if these two Gu worms could grant him any different treatment in Luo Pa Valley. But before going, some things had to be said. You want to take Luo Pa Valley completely, I do not agree with that. Fong Yuan said firmly. He Lu Lan stared with furious eyes, her gaze shined with a ruthless light, what do you mean? I found the information on Luo Pa Valley. Fong Yuan laughed, he said the location of Luo Pa Valley. He Lu Lan was shocked, she was staring at Fong Yuan with much suspicion. She had withheld some information earlier, she did not tell Fong Yuan this piece of important information. Fong Yuan took out open-door Gu and closed-door Gu. Like how He Lu Lan exposed attitude Gu to them, since these Gu worms were going to be used anyway and could not be concealed, he openly explained it. He Lu Lan snorted, looking at Fong Yuan disdainfully, without my information, would you dare to go? By the time you are willing to go, the chance would have been lost. Fong Yuan smiled, don't be so agitated, I am just saying your information is not as important as you think. But He Lu Lan acted very agitated. Next, they went into an intense verbal fight. Both sides were breathing roughly with exertion written on their faces. Their demeanor as Gu immortals was disregarded, but they came to an agreement. The ownership of Luo Pavali was divided up. Blazing Heaven Demonis would take 50%, Fairy Li Shan would take 20%, while He Lu Lan and Fang Yuan would take 10% each. He Lu Lan was very crafty. She used her 2 ants to force Fang Yuan to give in. 10% of the ownership might be little, but it achieved Fang Yuan's goal. He just needed the rights to use it. Fang Yuan had never thought of taking Luo Pavali for himself. After all, He Lu Lan had Blazing Heaven Demonis backing her. However, Blazing Heaven Demonis was busy refining Gu, and as a rank 8, her every action would garner great attention. She transmitted to them, since Fang Yuan had fixed immortal travel anyway, if they were in any danger, she would be able to save them. In the end, only Fang Yuan, Fairy Li Shan and He Lu Lan went. Oh no, some people have entered Luo Pavali. Hui Fengzi, who was hidden outside guarding the entrance, saw Fang Yuan and the others and quickly reported it. Soon, Prince Feng Xian was informed of it. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 953, Late by One Step. Chapter 953, Late by One Step. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. After Hui Fengzi surrendered in battle, he was subdued by Central Continent's 10 great ancient sections. The Central Continent Gu immortals returned while leaving him behind to keep watch over Luo Pavali. He had just sided with Central Continent and had originally been unwilling, and was only a temporary hired hand, so naturally he did not have the qualifications to know of Prince Feng Xian's true identity. He only knew an immortal had entered Luo Pavali, while he was keeping watch for them. He was at the mercy of others and had no choice but to slog for Central Continent. The moment he saw He Lu Lan and the rest of the group, he quickly used information path methods to inform Prince Feng Xian who was inside Luo Pavali. Prince Feng Xian quickly obtained the information. At this moment, his hand was still slightly shaking. Clearing up the winds of assimilation was truly not easy. Just from this, Prince Feng Xian could not help but admire Fengjiu Gu. The latter was actually able to last for so long under the winds of assimilation. He truly did not know how Fengjiu Gu was able to do this. Unfortunately, Fengjiu Gu was already dead. The process of inheriting the thieving heaven true inheritance was extremely fast. Only the identity needed to be checked, and if one was indeed an otherworldly demon, the thieving heaven inheritance would go to them. After Fengjiu Gu died, the inheritance space only had Zhao Lianyun remaining. So, she quickly obtained this inheritance, ghostly concealment. Right at this moment, she returned to Prince Feng Xian's side and reported the news of Fengjiu Ji's death. Sigh, we were late. Prince Feng Xian sighed inwardly. He then grabbed Zhao Lianyun's shoulder and flew away. An immortal and a mortal were soon away of the scene. At present, Fairy Li Shan and Blazing Heaven Demonis relation was already known by everyone. Prince Feng Xian did not want to get in a fight. The social circle of rank 8 Gu immortals was very small. In the whole of Northern Plains, the number of rank 8 Gu immortals on the surface was only 5. Old Ancestor Xuehu, Heavenly Lord Baizu, Yao Huang, Prince Feng Xian and 5 Elements Grandmaster. Blazing Heaven Demonis was a rank 8 immortal zombie who was barely able to join in this circle. One could say all 6 of them were very familiar with each other, and had fought and sparred with each other many times. To exaggerate it, if someone farted, they would know who it was, and they would recognize someone even if they turned into ashes. Were Prince Feng Xian to attack Fairy Li Shan and He Lu Lan, Blazing Heaven Demonis would definitely come out. In Prince Feng Xian's opinion, Blazing Heaven Demonis might already be secretly lurking in the surroundings. Prince Feng Xian's identity was very special, he could not rashly make a move. If he made a move and Blazing Heaven Demonis recognized his identity, that would truly mess up the situation. Why would Prince Feng Xian appear in Luopa Valley? Gu immortals were not idiots, they would easily guess Prince Feng Xian had a secret link with Shadow Sect or perhaps Central Continent forces. One should not forget the existence of Wisdom Path Gu immortals in this world. Prince Feng Xian was looking at the overall situation and in caution, he took the initiative to retreat, avoiding leaving behind any clues or evidence that could be deduced by Wisdom Path Gu immortals. He Lulan and the others still did not know they had already forced a rank 8 great expert to retreat. They broke the concealment seal outside and entered inside Luopa Valley, inspecting their surroundings. Luopa Valley was a scene of ruins. This valley of legend had experienced the 100 Days battle and was already half ruined. Moreover, the remains of the valley was already beyond recognition, as almost everywhere were Gu formations arranged by Gu immortals. Some of these Gu formations were the works of Shadow Sect while some were arranged by Central Continent's Hong Chi Ming. These Gu formations had no doubt an extremely bad influence to Luopa Valley's environment. It was to the extent that the bewilderment fog which blew all year round in Luopa Valley, and Luopa Wind, were nowhere to be seen. The group of 3 began to roughly search Luopa Valley. Fang Yuan found some remains of White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu. He sighed, feeling some regret. He had learned from He Lulan that there had been large numbers of White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu in Luopa Valley, but the 100 Days battle caused the death of most of them, and when the Central Continent Gu immortals swept through the battlefield later, they did not leave behind any living ones. Fortunately, Fang Yuan had already obtained enough White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu in Treasure Yellow Heaven, and fed Cleanse Soul Immortal Gu. This proved that the accumulation of those old senior Gu immortals could not be looked down upon. Naturally, the prior condition was you needed to have something enticing enough to make them act and carry out the transaction. Under He Lulan and Fairy Li Shan's attentive gazes, Fang Yuan used Open Door Gu and Closed Door Gu. No response. Open Door Gu and Closed Door Gu were the inheritances of Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable, but this place was already occupied by Shadow Sect and there were Gu formations everywhere, turning Luopa Valley into a stronghold or a fortress. Fang Yuan heaved a sigh, he realized the Thieving Heaven inheritance was already taken by someone else. Most probably it was Shadow Sect. But his guess was wrong. The true beneficiary of the Thieving Heaven true inheritance was Zhao Lianyun and Central Continent's forces. What's more, she had inherited it just a short while ago. Prince Feng Xian was late in saving Feng Jiugu, and Fang Yuan was also late by a step to arrive at Luopa Valley. Even if Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable had left behind an inheritance, so many years have gone by, it is normal for it to be taken by others. The true treasure is still Luopa Valley. He Lulan patted Fang Yuan's shoulder and said with a smile. Fang Yuan knew she was urging him to hurry up and get to work. Fang Yuan nodded, and activated Immortal Gu to slowly lift the whole of Luopa Valley. Fairy Li Shan closely cooperated from another side, countless Gu worms flying all around. They are actually going to take Luopa Valley. Hui Fengzi had been spying from outside and was shocked at this sight. Prince Feng Xian was also surprised. He had not expected He Lulan's side actually had such an unorthodox method. This truly caught Prince Feng Xian unprepared. He hesitated, but finally decided to restrain himself and do nothing. After spending an hour, Fang Yuan succeeded in storing Luopa Valley in his immortal aperture. There are still blessed lands here, but just to be safe, we better leave now. Ever since He Lulan failed in passing the calamity, she had become more self-controlled and had lost almost all her rashness. Although Luopa Valley was extremely ruined, but with Tai Bai Yunxing's landscape as before, it could definitely be restored. Compared to the blessed lands, Luopa Valley's value was extremely difficult to replace. Many Gu immortals had fallen here in the 100 Days battle. After they died, their immortal apertures should have become blessed lands hidden in space within this place. Fang Yuan could take away Luopa Valley, but he could not bring these blessed lands. However, now was not a good time to search for them. After taking Luopa Valley, Fang Yuan and the group quickly made their retreat. They left really quickly, they know their situation. Far away, Prince Feng Xian quietly looked at the receding figures of the three people, his gaze dark and cold. Although he could not make a move, he had the two female Gu immortals, Sword Master Yulan and Lu Yao, under him, and he also had other secret forces. Prince Feng Xian had hidden in northern plains for hundreds of years. Naturally, he would have accumulated quite a bit of strength. He had still been wanting to find trouble for Fang Yuan and the others, but they left too quickly, so he was unable to chase them. Prince Feng Xian glanced at the battlefield of the 100 Days battle. Luopa Valley was already gone. This place had now become an empty desolate land. Although the auras of immortal Gu were removed as much as possible, an expert could still sense some clues. So many Gu immortals had died here. These blessed lands themselves were rich resources. Prince Feng Xian naturally would not give them up. The central continent Gu immortals behind him also would not give them up and would definitely move to retrieve these blessed lands. As for the immortal Gu, he did not have to even think about it, they were certainly already destroyed. Retrieving blessed lands, especially ones that fell in foreign regions, was a difficult and troublesome matter. I hope this troublesome matter doesn't fall upon me. It is better if those other 9 ancient sects take up the trouble. Feng Gu died from the winds of assimilation. He left behind nothing except 2 words in blood. I should first send back Zhao Lianyun and this important information to the sect. Prince Feng Xian did not remain any longer and immediately left with Zhao Lianyun. As for Hui Fengzi, he was still left behind to watch over the blessed lands. This is Shao Hun blessed land. He Lulan brought Fang Yuan and Fairy Li Shan to the blessed land left by He Qing. This blessed land was clearly dominated by dark path and soul path Dao marks. The whole of the blessed land was dim and gloomy, giving an oppressive feeling. In the central area of the blessed land was a large and dense forest. The trees were in all kinds of postures resembling female bodies. This was a special resource He Qing had raised in his immortal aperture. This kind of tree was not found in the nature. He Qing could be considered its creator. Thus these female-shaped trees were also one of a kind. He Lulan had already thought of the place for Luopa Valley, calling out the land spirit. Shao Hun blessed land's land spirit looked rather peculiar. It was a jade-green vine. The vine was like a cloth, attaching itself onto that familial emotion left behind by Su Xian heir to He Lulan. Fairy Li Shan introduced to Fang Yuan with a sigh. Shao Hun land spirit's ownership condition was to stay together forever with Su Xian heir. So after little Lan took out sister's familial emotion, she easily became the master of this blessed land. Fang Yuan was also slightly surprised. Who could have thought that He Cheng's final obsession before his death was actually Su Xian heir? It could be seen he truly loved Su Xian heir, and even during the moments of his death, what he thought of was still her. Humans were truly complicated creatures. Turbulent events occurred over time. Most people did not understand themselves fully even until their deaths. Little Lan, you have returned. Su Xian heir's familial emotion looked at He Lulan with love. Mother. Su Xian heir softly called out, then ordered the land spirit. The land spirit brought the 3 to another part of the blessed land in an instant. The land spirit's movement ability signified this blessed land had a lot of space path Dao marks. Fang Yuan star form blessed land had few space path Dao marks, so star form land spirit did not have the ability to teleport. Boom, Fang Yuan placed down Luopa Valley. Fairy Li Shan could not help but smile at the completion of this task. Fang Yuan, you have Dang Hun Mountain, I have Minuscule Mountain, and Little Lan has Luopa Valley. Huh, this is interesting, we actually have possession of 3 secluded domains of heaven and earth. Gazing at the Luopa Valley below him, Fang Yuan also could not help but reveal some look of expectation. Dang Hun Mountain and Luopa Valley were proclaimed by Spectral Soul Demon Venerable as the 2 treasures of soul path cultivation. Fang Yuan was already gaining endless profits from Dang Hun Mountain. He wondered how this Luopa Valley would make him grow. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 954, Blue. Chapter 954, Blue. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Central Continent, Spirit Affinity House, Discussion Hall. There were 15 Gu immortals in the sect, more than half of them had come in person. This was a rare sight. There were meetings held in the sect quite often. Gu immortals only needed to participate with their will or emotion. But now, there were 8 Gu immortals who came in person, including the only 2 rank 8 Gu immortals in Spirit Affinity House. The reason for this situation was Feng Jiuji's disappearance. Spirit Affinity House's Gu immortals felt uneasy and uncertain towards the future. This time, we gathered everyone here to declare important information. Spirit Affinity House's first Supreme Elder sat at the main seat as she looked around, speaking solemnly. Spirit Affinity House was very different from the other 9 sects in one aspect. They had a high proportion of female immortals. Spirit Affinity House had 10 female Gu immortals, but only 5 male Gu immortals. Spirit Affinity House's first Supreme Elder and second Supreme Elder were both female rank 8 immortals. At this moment, everyone's attentions were focused on first Supreme Elder. First Supreme Elder was expressionless, but second Supreme Elder beside her had a grim expression. The Gu immortals observed their reactions and had a very bad feeling. As expected, first Supreme Elder's following words were like a huge rock crashing into their hearts. It has been confirmed, Feng Gu has died in Northern Plains. He died inside the winds of assimilation. He did not leave behind anything but 2 words written in blood. All of the immortals' hearts sank. Fairy Bai Qing, who attended the meeting personally, felt her head spinning as her expression paled. Even though they were mentally prepared, when they heard the news, everything still found it unbelievable. Feng Gu, who was so strong, actually died in Northern Plains. In contrast, the Gu immortals who were weaker than him were alive and returned to their sects. Honestly speaking, when Feng Gu went to Northern Plains, nobody expected this ending. Since long ago, Feng Jiuji's strength was ingrained into everyone's minds. He was the face of Spirit Affinity House, he had even become a symbol. Now that he was dead, the immortals felt dejected and empty inside. Even those who were against him, Su Hao and Li Juning, had the same feelings. First Supreme Elder continued, look at the information path Gu worms in front of you, the details are recorded inside, take a look. The Gu immortals looked into the Gu worms. Sigh, Lord Feng Gu died in the winds of assimilation, it was not an unworthy death. Long after, a Gu immortal broke the silence in the hall. Fairy Bai Qing's eyes were shut, her body was trembling slightly, the intense pain and grief engulfed her like a tsunami. She loved Feng Gu so deeply, and Feng Gu loved her just as much. Her mind was filled with the scene before he left. To think that it was the last time she would see him. People were often played by destiny. Right now, she was alive while he was dead, she was in Central Continent while he perished in Northern Plains. Fairy Bai Qing did not dare to open her eyes, she was afraid that her tears would flow out uncontrollably if she did. She tried to think of her daughter and said to herself internally, Bai Qing, oh Bai Qing, you must stay strong. At this time, you cannot let others see your weakness. She took a few deep breaths, slowly opening her eyes. Her eyes were watery and had redness in them. At this moment, the immortals in the hall were discussing Feng Jiuji's final action. Before Feng Gu died, he wrote Bo Qing on his palm. What was he trying to say? In my opinion, this lead is very important. Feng Gu must have understood something while under the immense pressure of death. It is a pity that he was already beyond saving when he met Zhao Lianyun. He did not have the strength to speak anymore, he only left this clue for us. Feng Gu was investigating the truth behind the collapse of 88 Truyang building. What does that have to do with Bo Qing? Feng Gu and Bo Qing are very similar people. Of course, Bo Qing was much stronger than him, he was at the peak of Central Continent, even Heavenly Court Gu immortals had to bow to him. At that time, Spirit Affinity House was at its most glorious period. Back then, many people thought highly of him, that he would become a sword path immortal venerable. It was a pity that he failed in the end. We all know about Bo Qing's information. What I want to know is, why did Feng Gu write his name before dying? What was he trying to tell us? The hall became silent, a Gu immortal opened their mouth, did everyone forget? In the information returned, Feng Jiugu had fought against Qin Bai Sheng, who used five-finger fist heart sword. This killer move was created by Bo Qing, it was his signature killer move. Feng Jiugu was trying to say that the collapse of 88 Truyang building was related to Bo Qing. According to my deduction, he should have thought that since the other party had five-finger fist heart sword, they must be related to Bo Qing in some way. Bo Qing was a Gu immortal of Spirit Affinity House, we will have an advantage in investigating it, this is an important lead. That is indeed the case, back then, Bo Qing died under the tribulation, not even his ashes were left. How can his killer move be used by a Northern Plains Gu immortal? The Gu immortal talked about it for a while, they had all sorts of ideas, but none were reliable. First Supreme Elder raised her hand, her action made the hall turn quiet. No matter what, we have to investigate Bo Qing's matter. I will pass this mission to you, Bai Qing. Hearing First Supreme Elder call her name, Fairy Bai Qing turned around and looked at First Supreme Elder, agreeing. These was her husband's final words before dying. Fairy Bai Qing would exert all her efforts to investigate this lead, and find the truth. Only we will know about Feng Jiuji's death, conceal it as much as possible. Whoever leaks this information will become under trial as a traitor of the sect. First Supreme Elder called out coldly, next, we will talk about the forces that are under our sect's control in Central Continent. Feng Jiuji's death created many problems for Spirit Affinity House. Even though the sect had two rank 8 Gu immortals, unless they were in a perilous situation, these two Gu immortals would not move easily. There were many reasons. Firstly, rank 8 cultivation level was like treading on thin ice, the Gu immortals would be very careful, and spend all their efforts on the tribulations. If they were careless, and lost their battle strength from fighting, they would die under the terrifying might of the tribulations. Secondly, the 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent had a sole origin, that was Heavenly Court. With Heavenly Court around, the conflicts of the 10 great ancient sects would never escalate, they did not require rank 8 Gu immortals to intervene. Thus, in the world of Central Continent's Gu immortals, or even in all 5 regions, the most active ones were rank 7 Gu immortals and rank 6 Gu immortals. And among rank 7s, the invincible Feng Jiugu was important beyond words for the sect. Because of his existence, Spirit Affinity House could expand to such a size, and occupy countless precious resource points. With Feng Jiuji's demise, Spirit Affinity House was much less of a threat towards the other sections. The resources that they controlled were like pieces of delicious meat that attracted countless greedy gazes. Xuanwu Mountain Range has rich resources, it is a treasury of immortal materials, at least one rank 7 Gu immortal needs to guard it. The mining inside the Golden Sand Cave has reached a critical moment, we have already invested a huge amount of time and resources into it, now is the time we reap our harvest, we should not give it up. Reincarnation battlefield is most important. The Gu immortals felt headaches, they had too large of a sphere of influence but too few Gu immortals. Even if they were split their forces up to defend everywhere, they still had insufficient numbers. At this time, they finally realized that Feng Jiuji's reputation was such a huge deterrence to the outside world. Fairy Bai Qing was silent. The Gu immortals were talking about immortal materials or other resources constantly, nobody talked about Feng Jiugu anymore. It was as if Feng Jiuji's existence ended with the discussion of the two words, Bo Qing. Fairy Bai Qing felt some sadness towards this, husband, oh husband, you made so many contributions to the sect, yet in the end, these people forget about you in an instant. In the entire process of the discussion, Fairy Bai Qing's mind was not focused on it. The immortals could tell and understood why, even the strict First Supreme Elder did not criticize her. Only when the immortals mentioned Zhao Lianyun did Fairy Bai Qing's eyes light up, showing deep concern. If Feng Jiugu was still around, Feng Jiugu would almost certainly become Spirit Affinity House's next generation fairy. But now that Feng Jiugu was gone, and Zhao Lianyun appeared out of nowhere, she became Feng Jin Huang's greatest threat. Fairy Bai Qing doted on her daughter, of course, thus she was very concerned about Zhao Lianyun's matters. She heard the Gu immortals discuss. Zhao Lianyun inherited 2 thieving heaven true inheritances, did anything change in her? Otherworldly demons cannot be trusted. Divine concealment, ghostly concealment, these two are top-tier defensive immortal killer moves. We are still researching on them. With our current progress, it is profound and unfathomable. These two immortal killer moves have formed 2 layers of Dao marks cloaking Zhao Lianyun's soul. I have never seen such a unique usage of Dao marks. These 2 layers of Dao marks will always protect Zhao Lianyun. We tried many methods to deduce her, but there is no effect. We as Gu immortals are deducing immortal, but we failed to get anything. If I did not experience it myself, I would not believe it. Did you all notice? Divine concealment and ghostly concealment are top-tier defensive killer moves that do not expend immortal essence. They are like fortune rivaling heaven. Gu, the power of venerables are truly hard to comprehend. Hiding from the deductions of thoughts, wills, and emotions, this is the defensive effect of divine concealment. Then what about ghostly concealment? That is still unclear. We have tried many methods. Oh, Zhao Lianyun was very cooperative during the entire process. I feel that even though she is an otherworldly demon, she knows how to behave properly, she can be nurtured. This little fellow wants to save her lover. But sadly, according to our intelligence, old ancestor Shui who has already gathered enough immortal materials, he will start the refinement soon. Finally, First Supreme Elder concluded this meeting, continue researching, and also increase Zhao Lianyun's attachment to our sect. I am looking forward to her future. At the same time, in a nameless forest, 7-star child immortal zombie looked at a mirror to communicate with someone. There was a vague elderly figure in the mirror. He spoke slowly, all the preparations are in place. But Heavenly Court has already completed their last process of repairing Fate. Gu, you have to act in advance now. Understood. 7-star child immortal zombie said solemnly. Be careful, Vice Envoy Blue. The figure in the mirror spoke again. 7-star child did not speak, he stopped activating this information path immortal killer move and the mirror vanished. Next, he turned around and entered deep into the forest without looking back. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 955, Swords Traverse Central Continent. Chapter 955, Swords Traverse Central Continent. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. The scene was quiet and dark. Under the hazy moonlight, shadows of trees seemed to be dancing. The occasional breeze, the cries of birds and the growls of beasts felt like the sleep-talking of this mountain range. Lanterns were lit in a cabin in the mountain valley, giving off a dim light. Feng Jin Huang lay on the bed, weak and pale without a trace of rosiness on her face. She looked at Fairy Bai Qing who was sitting at the edge of the bed, and apologized, "Mother, I made a mistake, I will not do it again." Fairy Bai Qing was grave. "Huang heir, I know what you are thinking about. You are cultivating so desperately that you have already injured yourself 5 or 6 times over these last dozens of days. I have warned you when you began cultivating, you need to act according to what is natural and be in control. But what you are doing is going for more haste, which is instead causing you to progress slowly, you might even collapse and endanger your life as well." Feng Jin Huang lowered her eyelids, speaking quietly, "Mother, I am sorry. I have already placed Gu in your body. As punishment, you cannot cultivate for 7 days and 7 nights and you can only move around this mountain valley. If you are hungry, you can pick up wild fruits, if you are thirsty, you can go drink from the mountain spring. Think properly over these days." Fairy Bai Qing said in a heavy voice. "Mother, don't." Feng Jin Huang was very anxious. However, Fairy Bai Qing brushed her sleeves at Feng Jin Huang's cheek. Immediately, an intense sleepiness attacked Feng Jin Huang's mind. Her eyelids were extremely heavy and she felt so exhausted that she was not able to say anything. In the blink of an eye, she fell into a deep sleep. Seeing her daughter in a deep sleep but still frowning slightly, Fairy Bai Qing was sad and worried. Fairy Bai Qing had not informed Feng Jin Huang of Feng Jiuji's death. On one hand, Spirit Affinity House wanted to conceal the news for as long as possible to make arrangements more easily. Feng Jin Huang, a mortal, was not qualified to know. After all, prying information from mortals were much easier than prying information from Gu immortals. Secondly, Fairy Bai Qing did not know how she could inform her. Why was Feng Jin Huang cultivating so desperately? She was working hard to advance further, to become stronger so that she could look for her father and save him. How could Fairy Bai Qing tell the cruel truth to Feng Jin Huang? She could not bear to sigh. As she looked at her daughter's face, Fairy Bai Qing heaved a long sigh. Her normally upright posture and dignified white robe, in this dim light, looked weak and dull. She was truly tired. Only now did she remove the disguise and revealed her true emotions. Fairy Bai Qing softly caressed Feng Jin Huang's cheek. The love and affection in her gaze could even melt iron. Feng Jin Huang's appearance combined the good features of Feng Gu and Fairy Bai Qing. In her face, Fairy Bai Qing could vaguely see Feng Ji's image. Feng Gu was dead, Feng Jin Huang was now her only sustenance to keep on living. In such a silent gaze, time passed and light was already shining in from outside the cabin. The light of dawn made Fairy Bai Qing realize the passing of time. She had to set out now. She stood up slowly, taking slow steps towards the outside, and closed the door carefully. She looked at the cabin in the valley deeply, murmuring to herself, Huang heir, wait 7 days for mother, you need to take care of yourself during this period and calm your mind. Fairy Bai Qing was not worried about Feng Jin Huang's safety. After all, this was Spirit Affinity House's central region. Even if there were internal fights in the sect, they were limited and a move would not be made against Feng Jin Huang. Fairy Bai Qing stepped on the clouds and mist, flying towards the northwest direction. Her destination was the source of falling heavenly river. Why was she going there? She had received the sect mission to investigate Bo Qing, the clue left behind by Feng Gu. Bo Qing had been a Gu immortal of Spirit Affinity House and the sect had large amounts of records on him which Fairy Bai Qing had looked through. In her investigation, Fairy Bai Qing discovered Bo Qing's experiences were actually extremely similar to Feng Ji's. What made her even more interested was Bo Qing's lover, Mo Yao. Mo Yao had been the fairy of that generation of Spirit Affinity House, and unlike those of other generations, she was an Inkman and not a human. But even so, Bo Qing and Mo Yao had fallen in love with each other at first sight. Bo Qing might not have entered Northern Plains, but Mo Yao went to Northern Plains, even entering Imperial Court Blessed Land. Could Mo Yao be involved in the plan of destroying 88 Truyang Building? Fairy Bai Qing knew the reason that Mo Yao risked entering Imperial Court Blessed Land was to help her husband, Bo Qing, pass his tribulation. Back then, the peak rank 8 Bo Qing was about to face tribulation to break through to the rank 9 level. Such a huge event had not only attracted the attention of Central Continent, but also the other 4 regions. Unfortunately, at the end, Bo Qing died, perishing in the terrifying tribulation. And Mo Yao also perished with him. In fact, all the Gu immortals of Central Continent knew of this. Fairy Bai Qing had also heard of this many times in the past. But now, as she recalled, she got a different feeling, as if they were in the same boat. She even envied Mo Yao, even in death, she had died together with her husband. Both had not let each other down, they were a couple who were greatly in love with each other and had died worthy deaths. Fairy Bai Qing repeatedly investigated and racked her brains, but was not able to make much progress. She discovered some clues in the records of the sect, all pointing towards the same place, the source of the falling heavenly river. As there was no breakthrough in other aspects, Fairy Bai Qing decisively moved towards falling heavenly river to search for more clues. The source of falling heavenly river was the place where Bo Qing had perished in the past. Spirit Affinity House was quite far away from the source of falling heavenly river. If Fairy Bai Qing relied on her own methods, she would take up to a year to reach there. She naturally would not do so and had already made sufficient preparations before leaving. She flew rapidly, using Spirit Affinity House's Gu formations constantly on the way to transport her. In one use, she could travel over 100,000 li, saving a large amount of time. She did not directly move towards the direction of the source of falling heavenly river, instead moving towards Myriad Dragon Dock. In the range of Myriad Dragon Dock's force, she used their transportation Gu formations to speed up her journey. She had already communicated with Myriad Dragon Dock's Gu immortals, and although she paid a high price, she was able to further save a large amount of time. She moved smoothly towards falling heavenly river. After Myriad Dragon Dock's territory, Fairy Bai Qing stepped into the territory of Combat Immortal Sect. Just like before, she used their transportation Gu formations to speed up her journey. A day and a night later, the fatigued Fairy Bai Qing was finally only 1,000 li away from the source of falling heavenly river. In front of her was an enormous waterfall that fell from an endless height. A boundless expanse of water heavily crashed at the riverbed. The rumbling noise of the waterfall was like the continuous crackling of thunder. Endless water vapor formed dense fog that shrouded a vast range of the surroundings. Why was it called Falling Heavenly River? Falling Heavenly River, a giant river that fell from the heavens. Compared to this enormous river, Fairy Bai Qing was minute like an ant. Fairy Bai Qing had already seen Falling Heavenly River when she had traveled with Feng Gu in the past. Right now, as she looked at this enormous river again, she could not avoid thinking about Feng Gu, feeling distressed. She still remembered what Feng Gu said to her at that time. It was about the reason for the formation of Falling Heavenly River. Feng Gu had confidently told Fairy Bai Qing that there were two opinions about this. One was that Falling Heavenly River itself was a form of calamity or tribulation, while the second said that when Bo Qing had resisted his tribulation, his sword light was so sharp that it instantly pierced through white heaven to black heaven. And Bo Qing had faced his tribulation during daytime. Thus this sword light had pierced a huge hole in white heaven, continuing on to black heaven, where it formed a small hole in the bottom layer of black heaven. It just so happened that above these two holes was a majestic heavenly river. The heavenly river followed the path between these two holes and crashed down to central continent, forming an inland sea. At the same time, the river surged and opened a path, forming the first river that traversed through central continent's mainland. Fairy Bai Qing had asked which was more reasonable between these two opinions. Feng Gu had answered with a smile, I am also not too sure. But the second opinion can explain the change in the water flow. During daytime, the falling heavenly river flows with extremely strong momentum, even rank 8 Gu immortals are unable to resist this momentum. And during night, the flow of falling heavenly river slows down to the extent rank 7 Gu immortals can just barely resist it. Nature's might was boundless and peerless. Even Gu immortals appeared insignificant when compared to it. Ending her recollection, Fairy Bai Qing's gaze focused. She had borrowed many water path immortal Gu for this trip, to help her enter falling heavenly river. However, it was clearly impossible to do that during the day. Fairy Bai Qing was a rank 7 Gu immortal, her only opportunity was to enter during night and search for clues. It was still daytime right now. Fairy Bai Qing reduced her speed and slowly neared falling heavenly river. She intended to wait for nightfall before she entered the riverbed. Time passed, the sun gradually set in the west, red streaks of colors overlapped in the horizon and the radiance of the setting sun shone on Fairy Bai Qing's face. Suddenly, she opened her eyes, looking at the distant falling heavenly river with astonishment. Roar! Water gurgled as a giant beast stretched out its head from under the river, revealing the tips of its horns. This was an enormous bull head, the horns were curved. Immemorial desolate beast myriad eyes clear bull. Fairy Bai Qing was pale as she recognized this fierce beast's identity. Falling heavenly river was not safe. Besides the majestic waterfall, there were also large amounts of ancient desolate beasts and immemorial desolate beasts living inside. The myriad eyes clear bull was an immemorial desolate beast and one of the overlords that lived at the riverbed of falling heavenly river. Doesn't it normally stay at the riverbed and patrol its territory? Why has it suddenly come out of the river? Fairy Bai Qing was puzzled, but she quickly retreated, maintaining some distance with this myriad eyes clear bull. Immemorial desolate beasts had rank 8 battle strength. Fairy Bai Qing could not defeat this giant bull. Moreover, her main objective here was not to hunt. Fairy Bai Qing was cautious while sighing at her bad luck. With the myriad eyes clear bull's appearance, she had an ominous feeling. Right as she was about to distance herself further from the myriad eyes clear bull, a sword light suddenly came out from the riverbed. Like a thunderbolt, it pierced through the myriad eyes clear bull. This sturdy and tough immemorial desolate beast was instantly cut into two by the sword light. Endless blood and internal organs splattered out, dyeing the nearby river blood red. Whoosh! Before Fairy Bai Qing was able to react, another sword light flew out, slashing at the river bank. The next moment, a long gash was slashed open on the ground, like it was a delicate tofu, and large amounts of water flowed towards the space rapidly. The river water overflowed, all of the surroundings were covered with water. Fairy Bai Qing was extremely shocked. What was going on? What was this situation? The sword light had such power that its terrifying might had reached an extreme. The immemorial desolate beast had been cut down as easily as a vegetable. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Countless sword lights shot out from below the falling heavenly river. Like fireworks, the sword lights flew everywhere, leaving falling heavenly river before rapidly disappearing from Fairy Bai Qing's sight. Swords traverse central continent. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 956, World-Shaking Might. Chapter 956, World-Shaking Might. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Central Continent, Centipede Valley. A terrifying chase was happening in the narrow ravine on the mountain road. Quickly run, quickly run. A mini-man laid down on Hong Yi's head as it shouted anxiously. It hurts, it hurts. Don't pull my hair. Hong Yi screamed in pain. The mini-man did not pay attention to what he said, it subconsciously grabbed onto Hong Yi's hair and turned back to look. Damn it! It is already here, quickly leave, if you are not fast enough, we will be eaten by it. The mini-man called out frantically. I also want to move faster. Hong Yi gritted his teeth, exerting all his effort to use his movement gu. Unfortunately, his cultivation level was too low, at only rank 2 upper stage. Of course, this cultivation level was already very rare at Hong Yi's age. Ever since the refinement path convention, Hong Yi had obtained some lucky opportunities and his cultivation speed far surpassed others. But in this current moment of danger, rank 2 upper stage cultivation level was useless against the wild rank 5 golden horn centipede chasing behind him. This centipede had a huge body, it was like a large python. It had a sharp horn on its head, when it moved on the ground, its hundreds of legs stomped, its body twisted as it moved rapidly. We're finished. It is already right behind you. The mini-man was pale from shock, it was terror-stricken. I'll risk it. Hong Yi could also feel the golden horn centipede getting closer, the hair over his body was standing on end from fear, he had no choice but to use his only killer move. This killer move was a movement killer move. But Hong Yi had only obtained it recently, he had not practiced with it for long enough. When he used it, the success rate and failure rate was 50% each. Killer moves required at least 2 goo worms to activate. The more goo worms there were, the more complicated the steps involved, and the greater difficulty in activating it, but the power of the move also normally increased. Hong Yi's new movement killer move was formed by nearly 10 mortal goo. It was not comparable to a goo immortal, but for goo masters, this was a relatively huge number of goo. Killer moves were not so easy to practice. When the activation of the killer move fails, the goo master or the goo worms might receive damage. Thus, normally, Hong Yi was very careful every time he practiced this killer move. But at this time, his life was in critical danger, he could not care anymore. His original speed was not enough for him to break free from the golden horn centipede, he was sure to die. Right now, there was only one way left, he had to risk it. Activate, I must succeed. Hong Yi screamed in his mind. But wishes were wonderful, reality was cruel. Activating killer moves required intense concentration, some killer moves needed special environments and could not be disturbed. Feng Yuan could easily use his killer moves because he had a huge amount of experience in the 500 years of his previous life, but Hong Yi was a newbie. At this time, he was in danger. He had to pay attention to the path in front of him as the mountain was full of rocks and pitfalls. He was running rapidly. If he fell, his life would be over. On the other hand, Hong Yi was chased by the golden horn centipede. The intense commotion behind him was ringing in his ears. He was engulfed in the aura of death. How could Hong Yi be unaffected by it? Under this situation, those who could remain calm and absolutely focused were experienced experts who had already undergone countless battles and had disregarded the fear of death. Hong Yi could reach this stage eventually, but he was too young now. It's catching up, it's catching up. The mini-man on top of his head screamed in fear as it looked at the golden horn centipede, shortening the gap between them with a fierce demeanor. The centipede was heavy and had a huge body. It had hundreds of legs and a huge mouth. Saliva splattered everywhere as it bit at Hong Yi. The mini-man screamed tragically. It shut its eyes in fear. Even though it had wings, they were broken already. It could not fly. It had succeeded in stealing the rank 5 Gu material 100 flower dew during this exploration into the cave. But there was a price to pay for this. It had attracted the animosity of the golden horn centipede which was guarding the dew. Thus, the mini-man could only escape with Hong Yi, trying to get away using his superior speed. However, the mini-man did not feel any pain. It opened its eyes, showing disbelief. For some reason, Hong Yi had escaped from the golden horn centipede's bite. But at the next moment, the golden horn centipede chased them again. The mini-man was scared, but it could see clearly now. The reason was, whenever the golden horn centipede tried to bite Hong Yi, it would subconsciously raise its head first. This action would cause its head to go dozens of meters above the ground. Half of its body would be elevated from the ground as well, before it landed heavily. When the centipede raised its head, many of its legs would leave the ground, its speed would fall. But at this time, Hong Yi was still running without lowering his speed. Thus, Hong Yi could evade the golden horn centipede every time it attacked. This fool! The mini-man laughed heartily. It felt an intense joy in escaping from mortal danger. Man is the spirit of all beings. Wild Gu worms had limited intelligence. Their movements were decided by instincts. I was kind enough to escape with you, but you call me a fool. Hong Yi was displeased. I am not scolding you, I am talking about this golden horn centipede, you fool. The mini-man shouted. Hong Yi was still nursing displeasure. You are the fool. I said the centipede was sleeping. You should not have been afraid and simply should have stolen the 100 flower dew and escaped, but you had to scream for no reason. The mini-man's cheeks puffed up, guilt flashed across its eyes as it showed an embarrassed expression. It wanted to rebuke him, but at the next moment, its eyes opened wide in shock. It turned out, the golden horn centipede behind saw that it could not bite Hong Yi. It changed its attack method, using its golden horn. Of course, it had not become smarter. The reason was, during its long life, the golden horn centipede had encountered some large prey that it could not swallow. In that situation, the golden horn centipede would use its horn to slice the prey up into pieces. Opening its mouth to bite was the golden horn centipede's instinct. Using the golden horn was also an instinct. The golden horn centipede pounced harshly, lowering its head and stabbing its horn forward, soon approaching Hong Yi's butt. This was unavoidable because of its size. Fool, run! The mini-man saw this dangerous situation and shuddered in fear. It could not even grab onto the hair firmly. You still are calling me a fool, oh! Hong Yi shouted, but suddenly, his pitch became higher, like a rooster who was grabbed by the neck. There was shock, unpreparedness, and intense pain in his voice. The golden horn had already stabbed into Hong Yi's buttocks. The mini-man was full of despair. It thought that this was it. But at this moment, Hong Yi's speed suddenly rose by a huge amount. He shot out like a cannonball. The reason was, when he was screaming, the intense pain gave him a moment of inspiration and he successfully used the killer move in an instant. Hong Yi escaped as a result. Bleeding, you are bleeding. The mini-man screamed loudly to Hong Yi. It turned out that the golden horn centipede had already stabbed Hong Yi's buttocks, but because Hong Yi burst out in an instant, the two sides had been separated by a distance again. It was as if a dagger was pulled out of Hong Yi's buttocks, the wound was unstopped and started bleeding. My butt hurts. Ah, it's so painful. At this moment, Hong Yi's mind was filled with an intense thought. He subconsciously grabbed his butt, applying pressure on the wound. However, naturally because he was feeling pain from his injury, his mind was distracted again. The killer move that he had activated earlier fell apart, and his speed dropped again. But the golden horn centipede was still chasing him. The golden horn stabbed into his other butt cheek. Ah! Hong Yi screamed again. But the same thing happened again. The powerful attack, the sudden pain, Hong Yi's focus reached another peak. He used the killer move again. He sprinted again. You're bleeding, you're bleeding. The mini-man screamed. There was no choice, the two wounds were very deep, because of Hong Yi's intense movement, it was no wonder that blood spewed out. Hong Yi grabbed his buttocks as the golden horn centipede chased relentlessly, he was in such a helpless situation. Oh no, my primeval essence is running out. Suddenly, Hong Yi's expression paled. Gu masters had little primeval essence in the first place, it was easily used up. Activating killer moves meant using many Gu worms, the expenditure was great. After running for such a long time, Hong Yi reached his limits. Death was approaching, Hong Yi was forced into a desperate situation, there was no way to live. Are we going to die? Are we going to die? Lord Centipede, don't eat me. I am so small, I have little meat, eat him, eat that fool. The mini-man was muttering senselessly while grabbing Hong Yi's hair. At this moment, Hong Yi was feeling empty inside, he did not bother to respond to this mini-man. But suddenly, sword light that shook the world flashed. In an instant, the world turned white, everything turned silent. The sudden change did not make Hong Yi stop running, he kept running for a while before he realized something amiss. Looking back, he was shocked. The rank 5 golden horn centipede Gu was no longer present, it had vanished completely. Along with it, half of Centipede Valley had vanished. What was in front of him was a huge and deep trench. The sides of the trench were extremely smooth, like a mirror. What is going on? Hong Yi was lost for words, he could not believe it. Just that sword light. The mini-man was completely stunned. Central continent, East Coast. Waves crashed, rumbling non-stop, frost energy oozed out in the surrounding area. Youngsters, we are here. This is Profound Ice Island, the place where Flying Frost Sect is located. This will be where you live from now on, the place where you change your destiny. The leading Gu master pointed at the ice island and proudly introduced this. The youngsters raised their heads, looking forward. Some had shining eyes, some were extremely excited. Even though Flying Frost Sect did not have any Gu immortals and was not a super force, within a huge surrounding area, it was the Supreme Overlord, the only force that could contest it was 5 Virtues Sect. Not long ago, when the Central Continent Refinement Path Convention was held, Flying Frost Sect was one of the venues for participation. Because of this, the reputation of Flying Frost Sect had spread widely. This time, the children here have the highest aptitude for the last 10 years. They are the future of the sect, nurture them well, they will make us stronger. The leading Gu master saw these children and felt very excited. The leading Gu master said loudly, "Youngsters, it is your fortune to be able to become Flying Frost Sect's disciples. Now, let me tell you." Swoosh! At this time, sword light flashed, everyone was blinded momentarily, they all shut their eyes. When they opened their eyes, everyone was stunned, they opened their mouths and were still like statues with exaggerated expressions. The huge profound ice island was gone, in its place, there was a deep trench that appeared in their vision. Even the sea water was split apart. On the surface of the sea, a path of 5 to 6 li in length had been completely emptied of water. The lingering sword path Dao marks were extremely overbearing, blocking the water path Dao marks and preventing the water from filling up the gap. At once, a weird but domineering scene was formed. Heavenly Court. Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord held his walking stick as he stood below Heaven Overseeing Tower shakily. His other hand was holding Fate Gu, his old wrinkled hand was gently rubbing Fate Gu. This time, Fate Gu was successfully repaired to a great extent. Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord was extremely excited and happy. The ones who had repaired it with him, Bai Tsang Shui, Lian Jiusheng, and Bai Chen Tian had already left Heavenly Court, going to the mortal world. The Gu immortals in Heavenly Court mostly used sleeping as their lifespan extension method. After waking up, they had to make good use of their time, going to their sects and settling some private matters, or to take care of their blood-related descendants in the sect. Heavenly Court controlled the 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent, but at the same time, Heavenly Court's Gu immortals were also chosen from the 10 great ancient sects. In the structure of sects, Heavenly Court was like the upper-level sect, and the 10 great ancient sects were the lower-level sects. Not all Gu immortals had the chance to join Heavenly Court. Other than having deep attainment in their paths, great battle strength and reaching rank 8 cultivation level, there was also additional important criteria to join Heavenly Court. That was their values. Heavenly Court. What was Heavenly Court? Star Constellation Immortal Venerable had described it 3 million years ago. It was following the will of heaven, and upholding justice for heaven. After this restoration, Fate Gu can use half of its might. Using Heaven Overseeing Tower, we can find more people who escaped from fate. Eliminating these people will help in repairing Fate Gu. This can allow more people to be found and result in a beneficial cycle. As long as this progresses, Heaven Overseeing Tower will regain its former glory. Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord was filled with anticipation. He was about to step into Heaven Overseeing Tower again. Rumble. A sword light shot over like a flash of lightning. In no time, it sliced through Heaven Overseeing Tower. Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord's mouth was opened wide, his pupils shrunk to pin size. His body was extremely stiff. He saw that the upper half of Heaven Overseeing Tower slowly tilted and crashed onto the jade floor. Heaven Overseeing Tower. After being stunned momentarily, Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord screamed loudly. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 957, Rising Commotion. Chapter 957, Rising Commotion. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. It finally stopped. Fairy Bai Qing looked at the tranquil river surface, her face pale with lingering fear. When the sword lights rampaged, she was nearest to the source and had personally witnessed this heaven-shaking scene. Right now, falling heavenly river was filled with corpses. Large quantities of mutilated body parts of ancient desolate beasts and immemorial desolate beasts bobbed up and down in the river. The surging white heavenly river water was now dyed blood red. Although falling heavenly river came from the heavens, the river water was filled with vitality. Countless ferocious beasts lived within and propagated, large numbers of aquatic plants grew within, and there were also countless hidden currents, whirlpools and other natural traps which even a Gu immortal could die from. Fairy Bai Qing waited for some moments. No more sword lights appeared. She ran to the river and picked up the corpses of the beasts, and the branches and roots of ancient desolate plants and immemorial desolate plants. She had truly earned a fortune. The fortune was so huge even she could not help being joyous. But the happiness did not last long. Many ancient desolate beasts began to show up. Fairy Bai Qing could even vaguely see some faint images of ancient desolate beasts through the river water. These beasts' ferocity was stimulated by the bloodied water. The flesh and bones cut apart by the sword light were excellent delicacies to these beasts. More and more beasts were attracted over by the blood and flesh, leading to a fierce battle. They tore at each other as they battled for food, raising frightening waves. Fairy Bai Qing had no choice but to retreat. Over half the original quantity of corpses remained. She looked at them with much regret. These were all excellent Gu refinement materials. The sword lights shot out so suddenly. What happened in Falling Heavenly River? Should I enter to explore and find the reasons or not? Fairy Bai Qing was held back by the thought of Feng Jin Huang, thus she hesitated. However, she had a feeling that Bo Qing's clues should be in the riverbed of Falling Heavenly River. Fairy Bai Qing gritted her teeth, turning into a white light, shooting straight into Falling Heavenly River. From Falling Heavenly River's source, unrivaled sword lights had shot out everywhere, their range covering the whole of Central Continent. Whether it was the Centipede Valley in Central Continent's central region, or Flying Frost Sect in the east, or even Heavenly Court which was high above, they were all affected by the sword lights. The whole of Central Continent was in a commotion. Heavenly Court. Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord's face was ashen, his hand moved without stopping. He had immediately started restoring Heaven Overseeing Tower when he had gotten out of his shocked state. He had already sent a message to Bai Chen Tian, Bai Tsang Shui and Lian Jiusheng, urgently recalling them. Right now, they were already on their way. The damage created by the sword light was extremely troublesome. Its sword path Dao marks seemed to contain a corrosive nature. The remaining parts of Heaven Overseeing Tower might be standing upright, but it would not last for long. If the sword path Dao marks were left to continue corroding, it would definitely lead to even more disastrous damage. We succeeded in our last attempt at restoring Fate Immortal Gu, but when I was just about to use it, Heaven Overseeing Tower was split apart. Is this a coincidence? Or Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord had a bad premonition? After a while, Bai Chen Tian was the first to return, then Bai Tsang Shui and finally Lian Jiusheng arrived. Lian Jiusheng had stopped partway through, but was thus able to bring concrete information. I have investigated it. The sword light came from the source of Falling Heavenly River. Right now, the whole of Central Continent is in a ruckus. Falling Heavenly River's source, isn't that where Bo Qing died? Bai Tsang Shui exclaimed in shock. Speaking of Bo Qing, Heavenly Court's 4 immortals had complicated feelings on him. Back then, it was not that they did not try to recruit Bo Qing, but unfortunately, Bo Qing's ideals did not conform to theirs, and he did not join Heavenly Court. Bo Qing. Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord's gaze was dark. Investigate, we must investigate this clearly. Fairy Tsang Shui, you are specialized in water path, I will have to trouble you to make a trip. The 3 of us will stay here to restore Heaven Overseeing Tower. For some reason, I am having a very bad feeling about this. The other 3 immortals' expressions turned serious. Bai Chen Tian spoke. Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord, you are in charge of Heaven Overseeing Tower and Fate Gu. If you are uneasy, we cannot disregard it, we need to move quickly. Central Continent, Combat Immortal Sect. Falling Heavenly River's source has changed all of a sudden. I suspect Bo Qing's sword path inheritance has appeared. Jin Lai Yang, you will go to investigate the truth. You can bring 2 rank 6 Gu immortals, choose whoever you want. Combat Immortal Sect's first Supreme Elders will floated in midair. Gu Immortal Jin Lai Yang was sitting within fire. He was tall and well-built, with golden hair and fiery eyes, and a vigorous rank 7 aura. Hearing what was said, he instead snorted, not giving any face to the first Supreme Elder. You should go find Shirley for this matter. He is the immortal Monkey King. With Feng Jiu no longer alive, he is now the strongest among Central Continent's rank 7 Gu immortals. First Supreme Elders will smiled. Jin Lai Yang, Shirley might be strong, but he is not the only person in Combat Immortal Sect. He has already made more than enough contributions in the exploration of Starry Sky Grotto Heaven. Could it be that you want him to make more contributions? An idea came to Jin Lai Yang and he suddenly became convinced. He leaped out of the fire, and cupped his fists. Heh. First Supreme Elder is correct. I had thought of growing another 17 or 18 fire path Dao marks, but since that is the case, I will immediately move out. First Supreme Elders will nodded, instructing, go and return quickly. Wind Cloud Manor. First Senior Brother, you came out of seclusion. Gu Immortal Hong Chi Ming immediately greeted the person in front of him with great joy. This person was clothed in a white robe and was wearing a jade belt. He was tall and thin, elegance and harmoniousness seemed to be expressed in him. He smiled and nodded. I came out because of the change in falling heavenly river. Junior brother, you participated in the 100 days battle and personally witnessed Five-Finger Fist Heart Sword. I have been asked to go investigate the truth of falling heavenly river, please lend me a hand. Hong Chi Ming took a deep breath and said sincerely, first senior brother, you are treating me like an outsider. Back then, were it not for your help, I would not be around today. I will offer my full efforts. Spirit Affinity House, Discussion Hall. Should we send someone to investigate the strange change in falling heavenly river's source? First Supreme Elder was not present, so the discussion hall was managed by Second Supreme Elder. Second Supreme Elder, you may not be aware but Fairy Bai Qing has already gone to explore falling heavenly river's source a few days ago. Li Junying's will spoke. Oh. Did she discover some clues? A Gu Immortal unavoidably recalled the matters discussed. Second Supreme Elder frowned, Fairy Bai Qing only has peak rank 6 cultivation, it is not enough to cope with this situation. But the sect is limited on available personnel right now, who should I send to reinforce Bai Qing at this time? Su Hao's laughed, reporting to Second Supreme Elder, Fairy Bai Qing has actually already advanced to rank 7, it is just that she concealed it and did not report it. Oh. Is that the case? I remember there was still some time before the tribulation for her advancement to rank 7. Su Hao calmly replied, this matter has been confirmed. Before Feng Jiugu left for Northern Plains, he borrowed Time Path Immortal Gu to secretly help Fairy Bai Qing advance her cultivation. So it was like that. Second Supreme Elder mumbled before saying, Fairy Bai Qing advancing to rank 7 is a blessing for our Spirit Affinity House. When she returns, she shall be rewarded heavily. Also, open the storage and let her choose a rank 7 Immortal Gu. As for this matter of falling heavenly river, there is no need to send reinforcements anymore, just message her regarding the sect's intentions. Yes, we will follow Second Supreme Elder's command. Tian-Ti Mountain. This sword light, Bo Qing, the pseudo-immortal venerable who split the 5 regions with his sword, it was fortunate for the people in the world that love changed him, maybe this is the appearance of his sword path true inheritance. Sword path Gu Immortal Jian Yixing gazed into the horizon with excitement and yearning. Such a huge change, falling heavenly river will definitely be a gathering point for Gu Immortals, maybe there will be an opportunity to fish for profits in this commotion. Central Continent's 10 great ancient sects are strong and can eat the meat, but I should be able to drink some soup, right? As he thought of this, Jian Yixing hardened his mind and flew out of Tian-Ti Mountain towards the northwest. Whether it was the righteous path led by the 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent, or the demonic path or lone cultivators like Jian Yixing, they all started making their moves. Countless gazes pierced through space and gathered at the source of falling heavenly river. Bo Qing, a pseudo-immortal venerable, at the pinnacle below the venerables, this reputation that had been covered in dust resurfaced once again. The countless sword lights that wreaked havoc throughout the whole of Central Continent reminded the world of Bo Qing's power. A rumor, who knows from where, started spreading and kept on getting bigger, affecting everyone's mental states. The sword lights are the arrangements left behind by Bo Qing before he perished. He is reminding the world that his sword path true inheritance has appeared, and although he perished, he did not want his true inheritance to be obtained by the wrong person. He is using this chance to select the most suitable inheritor. Thereafter, the shock created from the sword light's might, gradually turned into greed and desire. Central Continent's Gu Immortal world was in a commotion. Countless Gu Immortals, even the hidden old monsters, started to move towards falling heavenly river. A commotion occurred in Central Continent, a huge dispute that covered the whole of Central Continent was going to unfold at falling heavenly river. But in southern border, it was calm and tranquil. The trees swayed in the lush green hills. On a mountain peak, in a stone pavilion. Old man Yan Shi was sitting inside the pavilion, playing chess. A giant rock was in front of him, on the smooth surface of the rock were star path Dao marks that formed either horizontal cuts, vertical cuts or diagonal cuts, forming a dazzling diagram. Below Old Man Xianxia was actually the famous astrolabe chessboard from history. A figure descended down from the sky, and the stone pavilion instantly filled with cold air. "Why did you call me?" Bai Ningbing coldly stared at the back of Old Man Xianxia. Old Man Xianxia slowly turned around and faced Bai Ningbing. Bai Ningbing continued to speak in an icy tone, "Although you helped me in becoming a Gu immortal, I am not a subordinate of yours who is at your beck and call." Old Man Xianxia smiled, speaking softly, "Do you know that Fang Yuan will be returning?" Fang Yuan. Bai Ningbing's gaze turned bright, he then squinted, hiding the sharp light in his eyes. With a cold snort, he said, "Explain it clearly. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 958, Pawn by Ningbing. Chapter 958, Pawn by Ningbing. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Looking at Old Man Xianxia, Bai Ningbing was very vigilant. Ever since he had advanced to Gu immortal, while in the process conveniently getting rid of his female body which had been troubling him for a long time, he thoroughly realized how unfathomable Old Man Xianxia was. Bai Ningbing's nature was to be indifferent. But his firm attitude towards Old Man Xianxia was only a type of probe. Even his strong desire of wanting to fight Fang Yuan and take vicious revenge was also a disguise for himself as well as a probe towards Old Man Xianxia. Although only a few years had passed, Bai Ningbing was no longer so concerned about Fang Yuan. Being at the Gu immortal level had broadened his horizons, he saw many more things and experienced many more wonders. What he minded was Old Man Xianxia in front of him. It was not that he had not secretly investigated, but Shadow Sect was still deeply concealed, not revealing a trace. He did not know why Old Man Xianxia was helping him, but at the same time, he was also discontent at being controlled like this. He had thought of walking away from all of this. But Shadow Sect had spent so much effort on him, they certainly would not let him leave easily. In addition, Bai Ningbing cared about excitement and brilliance more than his own life. When the enemy was stronger, the process was dangerous, resistance became more difficult, it instead made him feel like he had not lived in vain, taking it as a pleasure of life. Competing against heaven, competing against earth, competing against humans, the joy was endless. There was one thing that Bai Ningbing had never done in his life, that was, retreating in the face of danger. Facing Bai Ningbing's query, Old Man Xianxia leisurely took out an immortal Gu and said, "You only need to do as I say and I can guarantee Fang Yuan will return to southern border." Bai Ningbing's eyes shined with coldness, "You seem to know Fang Yuan's whereabouts clearly. But in the past, when I was advancing to Gu immortal, and I asked you the same question, you said you did not know." Old Man Xianxia chuckled. He did not respond to Bai Ningbing's query, instead continuing, "To the south of Name Peak, east of Liqiu, not far away from Rock Dragon Cave, there is a nameless mountain peak. The mountain is tall and there is a long river that passes by it, the trees on the mountain are green and lush, it is a lone mountain with no other branch peaks. Go to the top of that mountain and activate this Gu. Once you succeed, leave quickly. This mountain will become a forbidden zone for immortals, any Gu immortals that enter this area will be met with fatal killing intent." Bai Ningbing did not accept this immortal Gu, his eyes still staring at Old Man Xianxia as he coldly said, "You still haven't answered my question." "I don't need to answer your question. You only need to know that when this is done, Fang Yuan will return. Back then, you signed an agreement with Shadow Sect, wasn't the agreement that only after Fang Yuan is dead, you can be free from the agreement and regain your freedom?" Old Man Xianxia smiled faintly. Bai Ningbing was silent for a while, before taking the immortal Gu. He then gave a cold snort, and flew away, disappearing into the horizon. He made haste when traveling. 2 days later, he found the mountain Old Man Xianxia spoke of. "This mountain is ordinary and there is nothing strange, why did he choose this place?" Bai Ningbing was puzzled. Actually, he had many guesses, even thinking of the possibility that old man Xianxia was trying to harm him. But, he has spent a huge price to raise me to Gu immortal, why would he kill me now? The chance of this is very low. Bai Ningbing shook his head. There was another uncertainty which he had for a long time. Why did old man Xianxia help me to become a Gu immortal? Among so many people, why did he choose me? Is it simply because of my northern dark ice soul physique? Previously, Bai Ningbing had such thoughts, but now he was increasingly feeling the truth was not as simple as that. Bai Ningbing started to carefully investigate this nameless mountain peak, but he did not find any traces of Gu formations. He was filled with doubts and hesitation. If this was truly a trap, then he would be stupidly sending himself to death, wouldn't he be humiliating himself? Bai Ningbing suddenly had a thought, old man Xianxia would not make me come here in particular and activate immortal Gu for no reason. His motive is veiled in mystery, but there is no time limit, I might as well delay and probe him. If the matter was urgent, old man Xianxia would be very anxious and naturally would urge him. At that time, with the immortal Gu, Bai Ningbing could obtain the initiative. Bai Ningbing bided his time and made no move. Sure enough, someone on Shadow Sect's side became anxious. A black-robed Gu immortal appeared inside the stone pavilion, and spoke with a rough voice. Xianxia, Bai Ningbing has already gone for close to half a month, but there has been no word or action from him. Could it be that he ran away with the Gu, or maybe encountered a problem? Old man Xianxia was at ease, looking at the astrolabe chessboard. The astrolabe chessboard in front of him was filled with Dao marks, but compared to before, when Bai Ningbing had appeared, the numerous and disorderly lines had already reduced by a little less than half. Old man Xianxia was pinching his fingers as he tried to deduce the chess moves, while saying to the black-robed Gu immortal, Bai Ningbing is still there, just not making a move. He already had doubts that this trip is harmful to him, so it is normal for him to have this reaction. The black-robed Gu immortal could not help but speak urgently when he saw the leisurely attitude of old man Xianxia, but we can no longer delay the matter in Central Continent. Now, not just the Gu immortals from the 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent, but even a lot of lone cultivators and demonic cultivators have entered to explore the riverbed of Falling Heavenly River. Vice Envoy Blue and the others can only hold on for 3 days at most. After 3 days, Heavenly Court will realize this is an arrangement and it might disrupt our true plan. Old man Xianxia nodded, agreeing, what you say makes sense. In fact, the present state has already diverged from the original plan, the progress is really too slow. How about you send a letter to urge Bai Ningbing to make a move quickly? If he doesn't submit, we can take away his immortal level and make him fall down back to a mortal. He became a Gu immortal with our help, but he is only a false immortal, there is no need for us to continue letting him be so arrogant. We can take action first and remove his Gu immortal strength, making him immortal again, restoring his female body. Such a junior with his head high above the clouds, if we don't make him know his place, we won't be able to use him. The black-robed Gu immortal suggested. He, why do you think I am using him? Old man Xianxia chuckled, he lightly flicked his wide sleeve, immediately, a star mark was removed from the astrolabe chessboard. If Fang Yuan was to see this sight, he would definitely be very shocked. Doing this with such ease, old man Xianxia's wisdom path attainment level was definitely great grandmaster. The black-robed Gu immortal was wearing a large hood that covered his expression, but his tone was filled with heavy doubts. Xianxia, didn't you choose Bai Ningbing because you saw his 10 extreme physique battle strength? No, that is not the case. Old man Xianxia laughed, this is only what makes him special on the surface. His true special characteristic is that he is also someone who has escaped fate. What? He is also one. The black-robed Gu immortal was shocked. Old man Xianxia explained further, our crucial plan has been devised for 100,000 years. Our true enemy is not the Central Continent's Heavenly Court, or the other 4 regions, but heaven. So I am handing this final crucial step to Bai Ningbing. He is an escapee of fate, from a certain perspective, he could be said to have escaped the grasp of heaven's will as well. Only this kind of person is qualified to become our pawn. So it was like that. The black-robed Gu immortal came to a realization and had no more doubts. Old man Xianxia continued, "Bai Ningbing is a fate escapee, Heaven's will is unable to control him completely, making him a potent weapon for us. We will first let him spearhead the attack, and what we will do is build up our energy, using all of our strength to cope with the fury of Heaven's will." After Bai Ningbing left, I did not contact him and let him move freely, but you can rest assured, with his nature, he will not wait for much longer. Since that is the case, then I will continue sleeping. The black-robed Gu immortal cupped his fists, and took his leave. Bai Ningbing waited another 2 days on the nameless mountain peak, occasionally looking at the direction of old man Xianxia's stone pavilion. So many days have passed by, but old man Xianxia has not urged me yet. It seems he is not in a hurry about this matter. That makes sense. If he was hurried, he would emphasize the time limit for completing the task when he handed it to me. Bai Ningbing could not help but feel somewhat dejected. The probing just now was undoubtedly a failure. He looked at the mountain below him, and pondered, "I have checked this mountain time and time again over these last days, but I could not find traces of any Gu formations. Sigh. If this is truly harmful to me, I can only admit defeat, I could not find out anything, I can only blame my inadequate ability." Bai Ningbing sighed and hovered in the air, looking at this ordinary mountain. Go. With a shift of his mind, his immortal essence started to be consumed as he activated the mysterious immortal Gu. The immortal Gu let out some radiance, but it still lay on his palm, showing no movement. Bai Ningbing was slightly surprised, so this immortal Gu requires a lot of immortal essence. He continued to send beads of green grape immortal essence to it, the radiance of the immortal Gu grew brighter and brighter, and the exquisite body of the immortal Gu started to slightly tremble. After a while, Bai Ningbing's forehead was dripping with sweat, and he was feeling worried. "I have already used up hundreds of beads of immortal essence, why does it still not activating?" So the difficulty in this task was in this. Just when he was getting very puzzled, the immortal Gu in his hand suddenly buzzed, it turned into a ray of light that shot towards the sky. The light continued to grow bigger, its speed however was becoming slower. When it reached a peak in height, it charged down to the nameless mountain. Boom! It crashed onto the mountain peak, the clash produced incomparably dazzling radiance. Bai Ningbing quickly covered his eyes and retreated. He no longer needed to use his immortal essence. But whether the immortal Gu succeeded in its activation, he still needed to check to be certain. Thus, he flew to a distance of 5 li away, before stopping in the air. He then saw an unbelievable and marvelous scene. Within the intense radiance, the nameless mountain peak suffered no damage, phantom images started to appear over the woods on the mountain. This was a section of a long river, the river water billowed, rising and falling, filled with a mystical and natural wondrousness that would be difficult to portray. There was endless profundity that could not be described with words or expressed. This scene, could it be the river of time? Bai Ningbing's eyes suddenly enlarged, filled with extreme surprise. Afterwards, he saw the river of time's phantom image gradually dissipate, becoming dimmer and dimmer. 2 human-shaped figures seemed to jump out of the river, their appearances and clothes gradually becoming clearer. These 2 people were fighting. Both sides exchanged moves one after the other, the battle's intensity shocked Bai Ningbing to the core. Among them, one was enormous with bulging muscles, he was like a mythical creature that rampaged around with an extremely fierce momentum. He was a rank 8 Gu immortal. The other person was rank 7. But he seemed to be using a killer move to disguise himself, his whole body was covered in a layer of fog that made others unable to distinguish his face or stature. The only thing that could be clearly seen was a red lotus that was drawn on his forehead. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 959, Graceful Chaotic Dual Stage. Chapter 959, Graceful Chaotic Dual Stage. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. The battle between the 2 shook the scenery in the image, boulders shattered and the river roared. Even if the change in the phantom image did not affect reality, it was an extremely moving scene. The battle gradually heated to the climax. The burly rank 8 Gu immortal held the upper hand. He raised his head and laughed wildly. I have rank 8 cultivation and also possess the great strength true martial physique. A mere rank 7 dreams of challenging me. That mysterious Gu immortal with a red lotus mark on his forehead chuckled and said with a plain voice, Martial duel Heavenly King, your defeat is certain. Take this move. Right after he finished speaking, the rank 7 Gu immortal flung his right hand and a high platform flew out. The next moment, the contempt on the face of the rank 8 Gu immortal, Martial duel Heavenly King, was completely gone, replaced by shock. This is an immortal Gu house. What immortal Gu house is this? The rank 7 Gu immortal proudly smiled. Let me teach you, this is my original creation, Graceful Chaotic Duel Stage. Graceful Chaotic Duel Stage. Bai Ningbing frowned. As far as he knew, the present southern border Gu immortal world did not have any such immortal Gu house. Graceful Chaotic Duel Stages might was extremely mysterious. No matter what kind of attacks Martial Duel Heavenly King sent, they were all absorbed and sealed. That was not all. After the attacks were sealed, they could still be used by the rank 7 Gu immortal to strike back. Martial Duel Heavenly King's attacks were mighty, but in the end, he had to bear most of his attacks himself. The images transformed continuously, and the battle situation kept on getting more heated. Finally, with the help of Graceful Chaotic Duel Stage, the mysterious rank 7 Gu immortal won against Martial Duel Heavenly King, accomplishing an extraordinary feat of rank 7 defeating rank 8. However, the rank 7 Gu immortal also had to pay a heavy price. As a final stand, Martial Duel Heavenly King did not hesitate to turn into a rank 8 immortal zombie, almost possessing an unkillable body. The mysterious rank 7 Gu immortal was not able to take his life, and could only let go of this Graceful Chaotic Duel Stage, using it to suppress Martial Duel Heavenly King deep under the earth. To win against Martial Duel Heavenly King, the unknown rank 7 Gu immortal had to give up an immortal Gu house. After the battle was over, he sighed as he gazed down at his immortal Gu house that was under the earth, before flying away. There were no more images of the Gu immortals, but the phantom image still kept on transforming. The battlefield where the Gu immortals fought returned to tranquility. With good weather, grass and trees started to grow. Then there were lightning strikes and flood. Meteors crashed down and inferno raged. The plain terrain gradually began to rise, growing slowly. At first, it was a mound, then it continued to increase until it became a mountain. There were occasionally scenes of humans moving in the mountain. The movements were extremely quick, whether it was natural phenomenon or the movements of humans and beasts, they were shown like a sped-up video. This mountain also began to change rapidly, it occasionally had landslides and occasionally changed in shape. Finally, in the phantom image, this mountain gradually turned into the appearance of the nameless mountain. When the phantom image had completely disappeared, the world regained its original appearance. Bai Ningbing's eyes shone strangely. He understood that the immortal Gu old man Xianxia gave him was a time path investigative immortal Gu. It drilled into the crevices of time and transported the scene of the past at a certain segment of the river of time towards the present. The scene of a huge battle between the two Gu immortals was now this ordinary and inconspicuous mountain. This means there is an immortal Gu house buried here. Bai Ningbing fixed his gaze under the mountain, his heart thumping in excitement. He naturally knew the value of an immortal Gu house. Only forces with Gu immortals could be considered super forces. But even among these super forces, only the powerful ones could possess one or more immortal Gu houses. If I can get hold of this graceful chaotic duel stage, it will definitely be a huge help to me and I can more easily deal with Shadow Sect and leave. But this is bad, the immortal Gu's aura has leaked everywhere. The disturbance when I activated the immortal Gu was also not small, it will definitely attract other Gu immortals. Time does not wait for anyone, I must hurry up. Bai Ningbing had just thought of flying down, piercing deep into the earth and taking the immortal Gu house, when he hesitated. He thought of old man Xianxia. If he went down, would it be messing up old man Xianxia's plan? Maybe old man Xianxia already calculated his reaction and wanted him to go deep into the earth, explore the depths of the earth and take graceful chaotic dual stage. If it is like this, he must have something up his sleeve. The mantis stalks a cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. If I blindly move, all my efforts will be in vain and I will be used by others. Bai Ningbing's gaze was deep. He decided to first probe the surrounding environment before deciding to move. However, what he had not expected was when he had just approached the nameless mountain by some distance, he felt an intense weakness. His Gu immortal aura started to quickly weaken. He could not even exert his thoughts. Bai Ningbing retreated in shock. He recalled old man Xianxia's words. Go to the top of that mountain and activate this Gu. Once you succeed, leave quickly. This mountain will become a forbidden zone for immortals. Any Gu immortals that enter this area will be met with fatal killing intent. Bai Ningbing thought with a frown, could this be the forbidden zone for immortals? If this had truly become a forbidden zone, then how could he seize graceful chaotic dual stage? At this moment, the phantom image on the mountain peak changed again, turning into the previous scenes. Bai Ningbing patiently observed, and could not help having a thought. Could it be that there was a clue to take the immortal Gu house hidden in the transformations of these phantom images? However, after the phantom image finished showing the scenes, it disappeared again. Bai Ningbing was not able to find out any clues. He then discovered, the phantom image would reappear once in a while. Every time the phantom image played, it would show the same contents with no difference. He also discovered, the forbidden zone was expanding. At first, he could still approach within 3 li of the nameless mountain. Now, however, he was 10 li away from the mountain peak, but still felt exhausted and weak. He had a sense of warning deep within telling him that were he to forcefully charge in, he would definitely die. Looking at the huge fortune moving farther and farther away from him, Bai Ningbing was naturally uneasy. He had stayed here for 3 days, trying to hide this constantly appearing phantom image. He had already erased the immortal Gu aura, but he was not able to hide these images. Although old man Xianxia helped him ascend to immortal, he did not give him any immortal Gu. This phenomenon in front of him was created by a time path investigative immortal Gu. Bai Ningbing naturally could not cover it using mortal Gu. Of course, if he used superior mortal killer moves, there was a possibility of covering the images temporarily. But his foundation was shallow, and he did not have such methods. If Fang Yuan was here, what would he do? In the worrisome moment, Bai Ningbing recalled Fang Yuan's image. Despite him no longer being concerned with Fang Yuan, he could not deny that Fang Yuan's ruthlessness and craftiness had made a deep impression and subconsciously influenced him. He thought and thought, before he stopped in terror. He suddenly realized, this immortal Gu was given by old man Xianxia. This should be a plan of Shadow Sect. What was Shadow Sect trying to do? They did not try to seize graceful chaotic dual stage secretly and silently earn a fortune. Instead they were proclaiming this as if they wanted the whole world to know. Involving an ancient battle and the immortal Gu house graceful chaotic dual stage, probably the whole of southern border will be in an uproar. Be it righteous path Gu immortals or demonic path or lone immortals, they will all go crazy for it. None of them would yield a step for the immortal Gu house. This will definitely cause great turbulence and incite bloodshed. Is Shadow Sect's objective to bring a calamity to southern border? But how would this benefit them? Bai Ningbing fiercely slapped his forehead. As his anxious expression vanished, clarity returned to his gaze. What was I doing these last days? I actually let myself be blinded by greed. This is not something I can obtain. This nameless mountain will soon become the center of a storm in southern border, luring almost all the Gu immortals of southern border. I am only a rank 6 Gu immortal with limited methods. I can't stay here for long, I better leave early. Right, I should return and try to probe old man Xianxia on what he is thinking of doing. Does he want to use this to lure Fang Yuan? Bai Ningbing hurriedly returned, but old man Xianxia was no longer in the stone pavilion. He hurried to Shadow Sect's blessed land, but he was unable to summon the blessed land's entrance to appear. He also could not contact them using information path mortal Gu. It was almost like the entirety of Shadow Sect, including old man Xianxia, had completely disappeared in an instant. The wave of doubts in Bai Ningbing's mind intensified. There was a sensation of being discarded. He vaguely felt that the last series of events was anything but a reassuring omen. Central continent, falling heavenly river. Right now, the bottom of the riverbed of the source of falling heavenly river was filled with light. Countless Gu immortals of Central Continent fixed their gazes at the riverbed's only light source, their hearts filled with fervent desire. An immortal zombie with eyes closed was floating in this light. His appearance was just like before when he was alive, seemingly filled with vitality. Sharp brows, high nose, jade green hair, upright back, it was Bo Qing. Who could have thought Bo Qing would have turned into an immortal zombie? Back then, the Fairy of Spirit Affinity House at that time, Mo Yao, had also faced the tribulation with him. But there is only Bo Qing here, it seems Mo Yao had completely died. According to the sect records, that heavenly tribulation had such terrifying might that it shook the whole of Central Continent. It really is inconceivable that Bo Qing could preserve his life, how strong was he actually? The immortals discussed with each other. The corpse has been maintained for so long, who knows how many secrets it contains. As long as we can obtain it, we can decipher the profound mysteries of Bo Qing's cultivation back then. Even if there is no sword path true inheritance, just this research alone would be an enormous gain. Maybe it can even add to a true inheritance in the sect. Most of these thoughts were from the Gu immortals of the 10 great ancient sections. They were looking at long-term prospects, considering for the situation of their sect. While the lone immortals and demonic cultivators like Jian Yisheng were paying attention to the immortal Gu carried by the immortal zombie Bo Qing. There are still auras of so many immortal Gu on his body. This is really unimaginable for them to exist until now. These are all sword path immortal Gu of the pseudo-immortal venerable, I will be satisfied with even just one. Central Continent's righteous path was very prosperous, and the demonic cultivators were fiercely suppressed, to the extent that their situation was the most miserable among the demonic cultivators in the entirety of the 5 regions. These demonic cultivators and lone cultivators did not dare to have any idea of taking Bo Qing's immortal zombie body, and only wanted to make a profit and run away quickly. In fact, before this, in the process of entering falling heavenly river, almost all the immortals had made some gains. The remains of beasts and plants cut down by the sword lights were not few. As long as one looked for them carefully, they could find them. However, Bo Qing's assets was truly too attractive. Humans die for wealth and birds die for food. Since they personally witnessing it, who would want to leave now? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know to report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 960, Bo Qing Awakens. Chapter 960, Bo Qing Awakens. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. At this time, there were at least 30 Gu immortals at the bottom of falling heavenly river's source. The immortals had heated gazes, they were staring at the light lump that enveloped the immortal zombie, Bo Qing, they looked around secretly, they were very alert towards their competitors. Among these competitors, the strongest ones were the Gu immortals from Central Continent's 10 great ancient sects. Jin Liang, Hong Qiming, Qi Yuntian and others. And among the people from the 10 great ancient sects, the most threatening one was Fairy by Qing. Seeing this stalemate, Qi Yuntian said slowly, Fairy by Qing, this situation is very clear. Bo Qing has his immortal zombie remains, but his soul was decimated by the tribulation. However, there are some wills and emotions left in his mind, he can defend himself. Thus, whenever we get close, he will use his immortal Gu and shoot out extremely sharp sword lights, attacking everywhere. To weaken his animosity, we need something that contains Bo Qing's aura, or a Gu worm that he refined in the past. We can also use the wills and emotions left behind by Bo Qing. As long as we take these out, we can get close to Bo Qing and gain the upper hand. Fairy by Qing smiled bitterly, why would I have these things? If I did, I would have taken action long ago, right? She indeed did not. Because she had not expected to find Bo Qing's immortal zombie body. Qi Yuntian smiled lightly, Fairy by Qing, why are you lying to us? You are the first person here, why did you come here alone secretly? Is all this a coincidence? Fairy by Qing's smile became more bitter, you say I came here secretly, that is wrong. I had used the path through myriad dragon dog and combat immortal sect. I came here openly. What do you mean by secretly? She had come to investigate falling heavenly river because of Feng Jiu Ge's last words. But she could not expose this truth. Spirit Affinity House needed to stall the information regarding Feng Jiu Ge's death as much as possible, so that they could have more time to prepare. Jin Liang frowned more deeply now, his voice became more shrill. Why is Fairy Bai Qing hiding it from us? The current situation will only draw in more Gu immortals. As time passes, accidents might occur. We of the 10 great ancient sects should work together to jointly control situation in Central Continent. Otherwise, if those lone cultivators obtain Sword Immortal Bo Qing's Sword Path Immortal Gu, Central Continent would undergo huge turbulence. Is your sect going to ignore Central Continent's well-being just for your own greed? Xianxia's attitude was warm. He continued urging, we of the 10 great ancient sects are of the same origin. We should work together and obtain Immortal Zombie Bo Qing. I can represent Wind Cloud Manor and sign an alliance agreement with your sect. We will ensure you get your benefits in this matter. Fairy Bai Qing was silent. She sneered internally. Jin Liang and Qi Yuntian were working together to coerce and coax her. How could she not know that? She was secretly anxious. This had happened too suddenly, and Spirit Affinity House did not send Gu immortals to reinforce her. Even though she was rank 7, facing these immortals, she could not do much. No matter what Immortal Zombie Bo Qing's situation was, it was very important to take back his body and Sword Path Immortal Gu for Spirit Affinity House. The other 9 sects knew this. Right now, in their opinion, Feng Jiu Gu was missing. He was likely dead. Spirit Affinity House was weakened now. They could not let them obtain this Immortal Zombie Bo Qing. If they nurtured another Bo Qing who was as strong as Feng Jiu Gu, what would the 9 sects do? The situation in Falling Heavenly River was extremely dangerous. Immortal Zombie Bo Qing's sword lights were extremely sharp. They shot through the entirety of Central Continent. Large numbers of demonic and lone cultivators came because of it. They desired conflict. They wanted to obtain huge gains from it. As for the immortals from Central Continent's 10 great ancient sects, they want to stabilize the situation and not give these outsiders a chance. But at the same time, the immortals of the 10 great ancient sects were not united. Thus, the 9 sects were resisting Spirit Affinity House together. Fairy Bai Qing was thought to have possession of a crucial method. She could not explain her innocence now. Just as the immortals were in a deadlock, a vast rank 8 aura surged. All of the immortals stand back. We of Heavenly Court are taking charge. Everyone gasped. They looked at the source of the sound and saw a female immortal descending. It was the rank 8 Water Path Gu immortal by Zhang Shui. The situation changed at once. Central Continent, Heavenly Court. Light shone on Heaven Overseeing Tower. It had been rebuilt again, standing in front of the 3 immortals. Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord, Bai Chen Tian, and Lian Jiuxing felt the weight on their hearts easing. They sighed in relief. Ever since Heaven Overseeing Tower was slashed by the sword light, they had not rested. To prevent the sword path Dao marks from corroding it further and destroying more Gu worms, they had worked day and night to repair it without rest. They had finally succeeded. Thankfully, the 3 immortals rapidly replaced the destroyed Gu worms using the huge amount of immortal materials in Heavenly Court storage, saving it in time. There was something important to note. Heaven Overseeing Tower was a rank 9 immortal Gu house. It had incredible defense. Even though it was split in half by the sword light, what it truly lost was only the Gu worms near the damage caused by the sword. In fact, Heaven Overseeing Tower was not gravely damaged. After looking at it for a while, Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord took a deep breath and supported himself on his walking stick as he held Fate Gu, walking towards the tower. Lian Jiusheng could not help but ask, Tower Lord, are you not going to rest? Why are you in a rush to activate Heaven Overseeing Tower? Thank you for your concern, it is all right. Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord smiled, rejecting the suggestion. For some reason, ever since the sword light attacked Heaven Overseeing Tower, he had been having an ominous sensation. As time passed, this ominous sensation intensified. Even after seeing the repaired heaven overseeing tower, he did not feel this ominous sensation going away. Go. He willed. In his hand, Fate Gu turned into a mystical light, entering the top of the tower, towards the formation core. Heaven overseeing tower lord moved his aged body as he slowly walked up the stairs. Every step he took expended rank 8 immortal essence. The tower walls were shining in bright light, they appeared to be in a mess and did not give any hints or advice. But Heaven overseeing tower lord did not mind it. Fate Immortal Gu could only use half of its might, half of the images displayed were blurry or dark. After walking for 60 steps, the image on the wall became clear. On the nameless peak of southern border, the scene was depicted vividly in front of Heaven overseeing tower lord. In the image, martial duel Heavenly King and the mysterious rank 7 Gu immortals fight entered Heaven overseeing tower lord's vision. This old man frowned unconsciously. Rank 8 Great Strength True Martial Immortal Zombie. Immortal Gu House Graceful Chaotic Duel Stage, and this. On the mysterious rank 7 Gu immortal's forehead, the red lotus mark was very bright red and striking. An inheritor of red lotus true inheritance. Heaven overseeing tower lord's eyes flashed with sharpness. The pain that red lotus demon venerable brought to heavenly court and the damage he dealt to Fate Immortal Gu had tormented generations after generations of heavenly court Gu immortals for over 1,000,000 years. Heaven overseeing tower lord stopped on this step, thinking deeply. Red lotus true inheritance, it has to be destroyed. No traces must be left behind. The great strength true martial immortal zombie is less of a concern, but that graceful chaotic duel stage should belong to Heavenly Court ideally. Even if Southern Border has the regional wall, Heavenly Court has to make an attempt now. Just that mystical immortal Gu house, graceful chaotic duel stage, was worth the intervention of Heavenly Court's Gu immortals. Even though rank 8 Gu immortals faced much difficulty in passing the 5 regions' regional walls, and had to pay a huge price. Without concealing such a scene, Southern Border's Gu immortal world would definitely be stirred up, countless immortals would come forward to fight for it. If Heavenly Court wants to traverse regions and compete, we have to choose appropriate people, and the number has to be precise. Heaven overseeing tower lord thought more deeply and soon shook his head, placing these troublesome thoughts aside. He continued to go up. 60 steps, 70 steps, 80 steps. When he got to the 83rd step, the image changed again. This time, it was the scene of Central Continent. In falling Heavenly River, immortal zombie Bo Qing's eyes were shut as the Heavenly Court Gu immortal Baizang Shui led the immortals and controlled the situation single-handedly. In the image, Baizang Shui smiled and spoke to Fairy Bai Qing. But after Fairy Bai Qing replied to her, Baizang Shui's expression became one of deep disappointment. Soon, she concealed her expression and became calm again. She moved her fingers, setting up a Gu formation, planning to seal this place. But at this moment, starlight shot over, it penetrated the incomplete Gu formation and shot towards immortal zombie Bo Qing. As starlight shined brightly, immortal zombie Bo Qing opened his eyes. In an instant, countless flashes of sword light burst out, turning the world white. Even Heaven overseeing tower lord shut his eyes in response. At the next moment, he opened his eyes. What he saw was a bloody scene. There were bits and pieces of Gu immortal corpses everywhere. The head of the Heavenly Court Gu immortal, Baizang Shui, was rolling away with streams of blood. Her eyes were opened wide, she had died. How can this be? Heaven overseeing tower lord, who saw this, was anguished. 3 figures landed immediately. 7-star child was in front, followed by Song Zixing and Yumu Chun. Azure, you are finally awake. 7-star child laughed loudly, his body was emitting a powerful rank 8 aura. He walked forward, getting close to immortal zombie Bo Qing. Bo Qing's eyes shined with ruthlessness, sword light shot out. 7-star child was shocked, he did not expect Bo Qing to attack him. The sword light was peerlessly sharp, he was sliced in half, even his immortal zombie body was useless against it. 7-star child's pitiful death stunned Song Zixing and Yumu Chun. What is going on? Envoy Azure killed Vice Envoy Blue. No, he is not Envoy Azure, his mind is filled with heaven's will, and there is another person's remnant soul living inside his body. At once, Song Zixing and Yumu Chun were shocked and furious. Immortal zombie Bo Qing was expressionless, he turned around to look at them. Song Zixing and Yumu Chun felt a strong chill, they sank into despair. They did not see any killing intent from immortal zombie Bo Qing's eyes. They only saw the unfeeling and impartial nature of the way of heaven. They were people who escaped from fate, they were targets of elimination of the way of heaven. An intense aura of death engulfed them. Against the famous pseudo-immortal venerable, Song Zixing and Yumu Chun could not escape or dodge, they could only await their deaths. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible.